Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Madara Uchiha gives Naruto Sharingan. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by RinneBankai and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Prologue. Along a road in Ta-no-Kuni. The dirt road was quiet and underneath the midday sun in Ta-no-Kuni. The only sound being the call of birds and chatter of chipmunks in the trees, and the slow and soft footfalls of the single traveler of the dusty road. Uchiha Madara walked steadily in the dull summer heat. He was dressed in a loose-fitting black shirt with dark gray shinobi pants and black shinobi sandals. His body was covered in a light gray hooded cloak that hung down from his shoulders to the middle of his calves. He was a youthful-looking man, with pale skin and onyx-colored eyes. The only signs of his 60 years of age were the slight wrinkles around his eyes and mouth, and the gray color of his long spiky hair with its bangs framing his face and covering his right eye. Madara had a bored look on his face as he walked. I cannot wait to be done with this tedious meeting so I can get back to Hitomi-chan and Minato-chan. The Uchiha thought to himself as he stared up at the bright blue sky. It hadn't been that long ago when he had been planning to enact an ultimate genjutsu on the moon so that he could create a world without winners and losers, so that his losses to that blasted Senju would no longer matter. But that all changed the day he met the angel known as Namikaze Hitomi. The woman 20 years his junior had slowly pulled him from his world of darkness, and soon she was his world. Then 6 months ago she had given him something he had always wanted, a son. Now his world included little Minato as well. However, he had received some disturbing news from one of his contacts around the nations. It seemed the second great shinobi war, which had previously looked like it was winding down, was stirring up again with tensions between AIM and Konoha. Thus he was going to meet the man to get more information. Suddenly the Uchiha felt a seal burn on the back of his hand. His eyes widened with fear as he felt the stinging sensation of the seal, and saw the symbols. His heart was gripped with fear and his breathing almost halted as his eyes locked onto the kanji. The seal was designed to alert him if chakra signatures with hostile intentions entered within a certain range of his home, 3 kilometers to be precise. The kanji on his currently read 5, and they had shinobi-level reserves. 5 shinobi with ill intent were heading towards his wife and son. His wife was a former shinobi of Kumo, but she hadn't trained or used her craft for over a decade. She was no match for those shinobi unless there were only genin and chunin, and from the number he could tell it was more likely to be a team of jonin with a couple chunin. Without a second thought he whipped around and shot off into the trees with a whooshing sound as he immediately began to head home with his considerable speed, barely even being a blur to even a jonin shinobi. Even at full pace he knew that it would take him hours until he reached his family. He only prayed that the barriers lasted long enough for him to arrive, or at least that his wife held them off long enough for him to get there. When he did, he would slaughter those who dared try to harm his family. Screw keeping his existence a secret, they would know what it was to face Uchiha Madara. Hang on Hitomi-chan, Minato-chan, your husband and father is on his way, Madara thought as he blurred through the trees. Hai-no-Kuni, near the house of Uchiha Madara. Namikaze Hitomi sighed happily as she stared down at the baby in her arms. He had her sunny blonde hair and sapphire eyes that seemed sparkle with happiness. Although his hair was the same color as hers, it held his father's spikiness. Hitomi was a beautiful woman despite being in her 40s. She had long blonde hair that fell to her waist, and lightly tanned skin with bright sapphire eyes that expressed her emotions to those who gazed into them. Despite having given birth only half a year ago, she still had a figure most women would kill for, with a decent-sized bust that was just this side of large, a slim waist and wide hips with sculpted long legs and tight rear. Yes, she could confidently say that she could have teenage boys drooling over her. Despite her age, her face was without a single wrinkle with soft features and was heart-shaped. The past few years had been the happiest of her life. Ever since she met her husband, Uchiha Madara. If you had told her 20 years ago, when she was a rookie jonin, that she would marry Uchiha Madara, the Iwa no Naomi no Tain, one, a man 20 years older than her, she would have called you crazy. Yet here she was, not only happily married to him with a beautiful baby boy. She was brought out of her blissful reflection by a blinding flash appearing on the wall in front of her. As she looked at the seal written there, her mind blanked for a second, not immediately recognizing it. But when she did, an icy feeling came over her, as she felt as if a block of ice was deposited into her stomach. All the warmth of a minute previous bled away to be replaced by fear and horror. Her eyes widened with fear and her mouth dried out as she looked on the seal in horror. Shinobi were approaching her home. Shinobi with ill intent were approaching her and her beloved Minato-chan. It just had to happen on one of the rare days Madara was away. Hitomi had no delusions. If even half were jonin, she wouldn't live. Stall for time so Madara could arrive to save Minato, maybe. But she would die afterwards, Because despite being a former ANBU captain, she hadn't even trained in over a decade. Her body simply wasn't up to the level of an active shinobi. Gently she set her son down before leaving to the room she shared with Madara to don her former shinobi attire. 2 minutes later when she stepped out she was no longer dressed like a new mother. Instead she wore a tight black bodysuit with black shinobi sandals and the traditional white flak jacket of a Kumo jonin with a white clothes slashed out hitai that gleamed in the light, with the Kumo right in the center of the metal plate. Quickly she grabbed her son and rushed out the door, heading straight for a large tree 20 feet from her front door. She pressed her palm to the trunk when she reached it, and a seal glowed brightly on the gigantic tree. As she looked down at her son her eyes welled with tears, even as a previously hidden door swung open to reveal a room inside the hollowed-out tree that was just big enough for 3 people. The walls were covered in seals, all with the purpose of protecting the tree from any impact or attack, even from an S-rank shinobi. It was a safe house Madara built using a combination of his Mokutan and sealing knowledge. Hitomi kissed her son's forehead gently, even as she heard another jutsu impact the barrier. "Stay here, Minato-chan. Ka-chan is going to go take care of the bad shinobi and then she'll be right back," she told the sleeping child, even as her heart ached since she knew it was most likely not true. With that she set the child down in the center of the room. Walking out, the door swung shut behind her. Her heart pounding in her chest, Hitomi walked towards the house to feed her chakra into a particular seal Madara set up in the living room. The door closing behind her with a soft click barely registered in her mind as she headed towards the living room, the sight of the warm wooden house built with Mokutan bringing none of the feelings of happiness she usually felt when looking at it, only a sense of melancholy. In the distance the sounds of clashing against the barrier could be heard. Boom! Crash! Bang! She herself to ignore it, instead opting to kneel down and pour nearly half of her chakra into the center of the living room floor, causing a giant glowing kanji for fire to appear. The sight of it caused her to gain a grim smile. "I do so hope they have a few hotheads in their group. It will make this so much easier, Yufufu," she chuckled to herself. Without another word she disappeared from the room, to appear in the branches of a tree outside the house. Looking at the large green barrier, she stared in the direction of the lightning jutsu. "And so it begins," she whispered as she settled to wait for the enemies to break the barrier. 1 hour later, 5 kilometers from the house. A group of 3 ninja in standard jonin attire of Konoha with black shinobi shirts and pants and blue flak jackets, and 2 supply pouches on their hips, and Konoha hitaites strapped to their foreheads, dashed through the trees of Hai no Kuni. Their attire was the only normal thing about them. In the middle was a stunningly beautiful woman with a hem very large breasts. She had long blonde hair split into 2 ponytails with her bangs framing her beautiful heart-shaped face. Her eyes were a honey brown, and she stood at about 5 feet 4 inches. On her right was a very pale man, as in literally white skin, with long straight black hair and yellow snake-like eyes and purple markings around said eyes. The man stood at a tall 5 feet 10 inches with an athletic build and narrow snake-like features. Unlike the other 2, he also wore a black poncho. On her left was a very tall man who stood well above the other 2, at about 6 feet 3 inches, with broad shoulders and red marking on his face. On the side of his nose was a wart, while his eyes were brown and his long spiky white hair was pulled into a ponytail that fell to his lower back. "Tsunadeheim, Oroki team, you sense that?" The tall man spoke in a deep gravelly voice, being surprisingly serious for those who knew him. It was the other man that answered first. "Why yes Jiraiya Baka, I do," the white-skinned man replied in a hissing voice. The third ninja, and only woman, spoke last. "Me too, what do you think it is Jiraiya?" Tsunade asked in curiosity. Jiraiya suddenly halted, forcing the others to do the same, as they looked at him in confusion. They all felt the chakra being used about 5 kilometers away from them, but they weren't sure why it was such a big thing. Looking at them dead in the eyes, Jiraiya's face held none of its usual cheerfulness. "I'm pretty sure from the feel of it, that it's a very strong barrier, and probably several at least low jonin level shinobi are firing jutsus at it," he told them. As the 2 other members of the team focused on it, they discovered that he was right. As they came to that conclusion, they too gained serious looks, tension filling the air. They knew that it had to be important to be such a strong barrier. "What do ya suppose? Go check it out?" Tsunade asked. The other 2 nodded grimly. This was something that warranted investigating. Just as they set off, they sensed the barrier fall, forcing them to redouble their pace. With Hitomi, the former Kumo Kunoichi watched silently as the 5 figures dashed through the trees, landing in front of her house. Just as she feared, 3 of them were jonin, with 2 being chunin. The 3 jonin consisted of 2 dark-skinned men who appeared to be twin with matching black hair and thick beards. The third was pale-skinned with pale blonde hair and blue eyes. The 2 chunin were both average-looking, both had platinum blonde hair, but while one was pale-skinned, the other had dark skin. As soon as they landed, she saw the pale-skinned Jonin issue an order that made her grin. "You two, check inside the house," he barked at the two Chunin. The two lower-ranked ninja hurried to obey their superior, rushing into the house, completely forgetting protocol. Not even 5 seconds later, the house erupted in a pillar of fire that centered around the living room. The flames were blindingly bright, white-hot, radiating their heat into the air, so intense it caused Hitomi's skin to dry out slightly even from this distance. Down on the ground, the three Jonin yelled in fright, not expecting such a violent trap. With a smile, Hitomi leapt down and slit the throat of one of the off-guard twins, his partners instantly whipping around to face her. The second twin watched in fury as his brother slumped to the ground. "Bitch! I'll make you pay for that," he yelled in anger. He was stopped from charging by the blonde that appeared to be in charge, earning a growl from the large man. The blonde paid it no mind as he continued to look at Hitomi. "Settle down, Rojuro, don't you recognize her? She is not one you rush towards, even if she is out of shape," the man stated in a monotone. Blinking in confusion, the black-haired man complied as he stared at Hitomi, then his breath hitched for a second. Everyone in Kumo knew Namikaze Hitomi. Hitomi felt her heart beating rapidly with apprehension. Her only shot had been for the second twin to recklessly charge her. Her gaze hardened as her eyes became steely. A fire seemed to begin to build in her stomach as she looked at the two shinobi. Her maternal instinct screamed at her to tear those who would threaten the safety of her family to pieces. Well, Namikaze Hitomi. There is quite the bounty on you. I can't wait to collect it." The blonde man spoke, causing white-hot fury to flash through Hitomi. Her entire being buzzed in hyper-awareness as she prepared to strike, the adrenaline causing her body to dull its pain receptors. "Enough talk, let's get this over with," she cried as her hands began to flash through hand seals. With the Sannin, 10 minutes later. As the three students of the Sandaime Hokage landed in the clearing, they came across the site of an obviously intense battle. Smoke choked the air from the remains of a house that was still on fire. Scorch marks littered the ground along with gouges and craters. Amazingly enough, there was a single gigantic tree near the house that was completely untouched, despite all its neighbors having caught on fire or been knocked down. They had to hold down the bough that instinctively rose in their throats at the sight of the blackened corpses, and the sickly sweat burning flesh coming off them. However, their attention was inexorably drawn to the only person in sight that was still breathing, albeit rather raggedly. It was a beautiful woman with long sunny blonde hair and sapphire blue eyes that were clouded with pain. She wore a black bodysuit and white flak jacket with a scratched-out Kumo Hittite. In normal circumstances, Jiraiya's perverted tendencies would normally kick in, and Tsunade would proceed to beat him to within an inch of his life. However, right now that was the furthest thing in his mind, as he gazed at the woman whose body was littered with cuts. However, the thing that was the most noticeable was the gaping wound in her side that looked like some large animal took a bite out of it. Even though the flesh was blackened and looked to be cauterized, the wound still bled through the cracks in her burned flesh. There was no doubt she would die, not even Tsunade could heal it. At best she had 10 minutes. The women seemed to have realized they were there as she strained to lift her head and looked at them with her large blue eyes that seemed to be reaching out to them, baring her soul as she desperately pleaded with them to help. But the words that came out of her mouth were not ones asking for them to help her. "Please, he help him," she cried softly as tears gathered in her eyes, her hand reaching out to them in desperation. Slowly they stepped closer. Jiraiya's eyes held sadness and sympathy, while Orochimaru's held nothing. As for the final member, she was shaking in repressed anger as she looked at the Kumo shinobi. Even if she didn't like to see anyone die, she still hated Kumo for their part in her granduncle's death. As he knelt down at her side, Jiraiya took the hand she had outstretched and held it gently in his own. Before he could speak, Orochimaru spoke first. As soon as he said this, the woman's eyes widened slightly, but she spoke in the same pleading tone. "Do whatever you want with me. But please, help him. Help my son," she pleaded more urgently. At this, both Jiraiya's and Tsunade's eyes widened. Seeing they actually would help, Hitomi's eyes gained a hint of relief. "Over be by the tree. Hidden seal, use chakra," she told him softly. The white-haired Sannin nodded to his blonde teammate, who gave a nod of her own as she walked over to the tree, and proceeded to apply chakra to the trunk, causing the seal to glow and the door to swing outward. Stepping inside, Tsunade's eyes instantly locked on the bundle in the middle of the floor. Cautiously she reached for it, making sure to be wary in case it was a trap. Luckily it wasn't, and she picked the baby up into her arms. The little boy was still soundly asleep, the silencing seals having prevented him from hearing what was going on outside. Tsunade marveled at how cute the baby looked, her heart warming up as she watched him. Turning around, she walked back to the other three, stopping to kneel down on the opposite side of the woman as Jiraiya had. By now Jiraiya was propping her up into a reclined sitting position, her head cradled gently in the crook of his arm. When she saw Tsunade with her son, safe and sound, she smiled serenely, even as she cried, knowing this was the last time she would see her son. She shakily reached her hands out, soundlessly indicating she wished to hold him. Tsunade couldn't find it in herself to deny her. Even if she was in Kumo Shinobi, she couldn't deny her the right to hold her son one last time before she died. So she handed him over gently to the woman. Hitomi brought her son to her chest as she sadly smiled at her son. "What are your names?" Tsunade asked the woman. Hitomi looked up at Tsunade with a sad smile. "Enamikaze, namikaze hi to me, and this I is my son Minato," she told her. Hitomi looked down at her son with the same sad smile, as tears poured down her face. Looks like this is goodbye Mina-chan," she whispered. Jiraiya and Tsunade looked on at the scene sadly, and even Orochimaru's eyes were slightly sad. He knew the pain of being an orphan. Hitomi looked up at them one last time as her breathing started to become more labored, struggling for a few more minutes of life, even as she felt the immense stinging sensation in her side that made her want to succumb to the eternal slumber of death's embrace. Please take Haiyan with Yu," she pleaded. She had no idea whether Madara would get here any time soon, and by the time he did there was any number of ways Minato could die. Yes, this was the best thing to ensure her son's survival. Jiraiya gave her a comforting smile and a nod. "Don't worry, Hitomi-san, we'll make sure he gets looked after in Konoha," he told her happily. Hitomi's eyes flashed with a look of humor. She hadn't noticed the headbands. "Konoha, his father will throw s such a fit when I tell him." She giggled weakly, even as her breathing slowed to a crawl. All three Sannin sat quiet for a minute, before Tsunade took Minato from her arms. Jiraiya stood up, carrying her body bridal style. When he saw the questioning looks of his team, Jiraiya gave them a tired look. "Kid deserves to be able to visit his mother's grave when he's older," he said simply, gaining nods from the other two. With this the three Sannin took off for Konoha, where the beginnings of another shinobi legend would start to bloom within the leaf. With Madara, 2 hours later. The moon shone down on him as Madara fell to his knees in what was left of his living room. His eyes stared at the pile of ash and bone fragments in the center of the room where the couch would be. His heart clenched in his just as his stomach dropped, and he felt his breathing become rough. A cold feeling descended upon him as tears leaked from his eyes. Before him was what he could only assume were the remains of his wife and child. As he fell forward on one hand, he punched the ground with the other. "I should have been here. I should have protected them instead of going in search of the stupid information on this Kami-forsaken war," he screamed in anguish as his tears stained the blackened ground. He sat there sobbing harshly for the longest time, until finally he snapped his gaze up, his Rinnegan glowing ominously in the darkness of the night. A look of insanity was etched onto his face, his mind descending into darkness once more, with his two lights in the world no longer there to guide him. "I'll complete the Mugen Tsukuyomi. All 9 bijou will be gathered, and I'll create a world without winners and losers, and more importantly a world where I can never lose them again," he declared to the night. Chapter 1: Death of Madara. Valley of the End, 30 years later. On either side of the waterfall stood 2 gigantic statues of 2 men. The men were Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara. Currently the statues were cratered with pieces missing from them, and the upper half of Madara was missing. Below, on the surface of the water, stood 2 small figures. The first was a young boy of about 12 that stood at about 5 feet 0 inches and had gray skin with claw-like fingernails and fangs jutting from his upper lip. The boy had long grayish-blue hair and a black shuriken-like mark across his nose. Most distinguishing was the pair of hand-like wing on his back and the blood-red eyes with black scara and the black tomo marks spinning around the pupils furiously. For clothes the boy wore a pair of white shorts with bandages around his shins and a bark blue high-collar t-shirt. Currently he was glaring furiously at the second boy that stood across from him. The second boy appeared to be about the same age. However, unlike the other boy who was about normal height for their age, he was rather short, barely reaching 4 feet 8 inches. He had lightly tanned skin and wild 3 whisker marks on each cheek. Currently he was wearing a hideous orange jumpsuit with blue shoulders and a white collar, with a kunai pouch taped to his right thigh. The most noticeable feature about him right now was the shroud of bubbling orange chakra that covered him, with a single tail swishing slowly behind him and 2 ear-like protrusions on top of his head. His blonde spiky hair was wild from the chakra and his whisker marks thicker. His lips had a black mark around it and stretched across a pair of fangs with thin black rings around his eyes, and ruby-colored irises with slit pupils. His fingernails were claws and he was currently snarling at the boy across from him. "Sasuke!" the orange-clad boy growled as he charged up a swirling orb of purple chakra in his right palm. The now-named Sasuke's face twisted in rage as he glared with hatred at the boy. "Naruto!" he bellowed in rage as black lightning began to spark around his right hand. Eventually it was encased in the intense black lightning as the sound of 1,000 birds chirping filled the air. Slowly a leaf began drifting on the wind from one of the trees up above. As if it was the signal to attack, as soon as the leaf touched down the two boys charged at one another. The moment their attacks met they were surrounded in an orb of intense black chakra. Kanahigaku no Sato, Archives. Inside the Hokage Tower there are a lot of important places. For example, the Hokage's office itself, and the conjoining room that houses the Hokage's library, filled to the brim with scrolls on all manner of special taijutsu styles and jutsu that have been collected by the various Hokage all the way back to the founding of the leaf. Most importantly, the Forbidden Scroll of Seals where all of Konoha's jutsu labeled kenjutsu are written. Among all the important rooms there is one that, while seemingly for a mundane purpose, to the right person, it can be the most important room of the entire building. This room is the room where they keep all the records of all on-the-book missions, the archive. In the middle of the archive a figure slowly emerged from the floor. They were a strange person, appearing to be half plant and half human, with a Venus flytrap-like protrusion on top of its upper body. The person wore a black cloak with red clouds emblazoned upon, and blue shinobi pants and sandals. Slowly the Venus flytrap parted to reveal the face of a rather strange man with his green mossy hair being the most normal thing about him. From there his face had two different colors, with one side being white and the other black. The white side had normal human features like a mouth, a yellow eye and an eyebrow. The black side, however, had no human features save for his yellow iris. The man seemed to smile as he looked at the computer desk sitting before him. How considerate of them to switch to using technology for their main filing now. I would hate to have to search through all that paperwork down in the basement. He joked with a grin. Suddenly he spoke in another voice, this one rougher and serious. We don't have time to mess around, we need to look up the tip we got from observing Orochimaru, he said, appearing as if the joking voice was the white half, and the serious one the black, as the white side's mouth didn't move when this was said. Ignoring the comment, the man stepped forward as the flytrap split, the cloak along with it, and fell to hang from his waist, revealing his torso, and proving his entire body was most likely divided between black and white, with the black having white dots just inside the border with the white half. The man sat down at the computer and proceeded to quickly type in keywords for a search. Let's see. Jiraiya plus Tsunade plus Orochimaru plus Kumo plus Namikaze Hitomi. The man said to himself and thought as his two voices mixed to form his sentences. A waiting bar appeared as the computer began to search through the database for any reports that matched those parameters. As this was happening, the man began to speak to himself between the two halves. It's kind of funny when you think about it, for all the trouble it caused, Orochimaru's obsession with the Sharingan is what got us this lead. You think it'll pan out? The white half asked. The black half grunted before replying. It makes sense, Madara-sama was too distraught to actually confirm the remains were theirs, and we weren't created till later. On top of that, the Yandame's name and physical appearance matches up. The only reason we're investigating now is it's the first time we've had a chance since finding Toby. The black half replied musingly, getting hum of agreement from his counterpart. Finally the search bar fully loaded and disappeared to be replaced by a text document that matched the search parameters. A mission report by one Jiraiya of the Sannin. It says that they came across a dying woman with blonde hair and blue eyes with tan skin when they were heading back from a mission and sensed a barrier. When they arrived, the woman begged them to help her son, who Tsunade then retrieved from the tree he was hidden in. Before she died, she identified herself as Namikaze Hitomi, and her son as Namikaze Minato. I'll be damned, it is them. The man finished with the white half's voice. The black half spoke up. It seems so. We'll do some blood tests to compare the Yandame's DNA record with the vial of Madara's blood, and then compare both to the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. We're pretty sure he is Namikaze Minato's son, and Minato is in turn Madara-sama's son, but it never hurts to be absolutely certain, the black half said as the man quickly erased the search record and began to merge with the ground once more. Konoha Hospital, records room. The plant man from earlier looked at the results on the screen in front of him. That proves it. Uzumaki Naruto is Madara-sama's grandson, the man said to himself as he began deleting his searches. You think he'll call off the Mugen Tsukuyumi plan now? He may be a hard ass, but we know he has a soft spot for his family, and there's no way to revive someone completely who's been killed by having their bijou removed via the Gedo Mazo. The best they can be brought back as is a path for the Rinnegan. The white half asked the black one. The black half seemed to ponder this for a second before replying. Yes, I think he will, which is why we are going to go report to him immediately. Toby is too obsessed, he won't halt the plan even if Madara-sama orders it. The black half replied. The white half sighed, not looking forward to disturbing his master. The black half didn't deign to reply as they sunk into the ground. Valley of the End, with Naruto. The pressure on his throat kept him from breathing as he glared into the eyes of his opponent, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing him accepting defeat. In front of Naruto was the person he thought of as a brother, Someone like him who knew what it was like to be alone, his best friend, Uchiha Sasuke. How foolish he was to believe that. But Sasuke didn't see him that way. All he saw him as was a means to get more power. Now he was standing here being held up by the throat by a now normal-looking Sasuke who had a Chidori charged in his right hand. By now the Kyuubi's chakra had receded. Even with all that power, he still hadn't been able to defeat Sasuke. Now all he could do was glare into those Sharingan eyes. What's with the look, Dobe? Are you angry that you're about to die? Well, don't be. I meant it when I said that our friendship was worthwhile. It was worthwhile because when I kill you my Sharingan will evolve to the next level. That's how it works. To obtain the Mangekyo Sharingan, I must kill my best friend. Just like my brother said. Sasuke said coldly. For some reason Naruto found this ridiculously funny. Slowly he began to chuckle, and then the chuckle turned into a full-blown laugh. The duck-ass-haired Avenger looked at him in confusion. Why was he laughing? He was just told he was going to kill him. What's so funny, Dobe? You're about to die, Sasuke stated smugly. Naruto's laughter halted and he fixed Sasuke with a piercing gaze, one that the Avenger never expected to see on his face. It was an expression of pure seriousness and cold fury. His words that he spoke next filled Sasuke with white-hot rage. What's funny is that for all your supposed hatred of Itachi, you're just as bad as him, willing to kill anyone and do anything to gain power or test your strength. Naruto spat. The Uchiha's eyes widened and then narrowed in fury. Without another word he plunged his fist directly through Naruto's chest and out the other side. Yes, the Mangekyo is mine. Now it's only a matter of time before I kill Itachi, he thought to himself. Meanwhile, Naruto felt darkness closing in around him and his heart slowing and breathing becoming ragged. Bum bump. So this is it. Bum bump. Alone in this place, without having come anywhere close to my dream? Bum bump. Guess that necklace really was cursed. Bum bump. This is really how I die, how pathetic. Bumby you. With that last bitter thought Naruto's heart stopped and his breathing ended, briefly aware of a roar of fury in his mind. However, he was ignorant to the figure that rose up and picked his lifeless body up just as his heart stopped and his eyes glazed over. Inside the seal. Inside its cage the Kyuubi no Kitsune was roaring in fury as its container's life slowly faded. The light was fading as darkness surrounded it slowly from all sides and pieces of rubble rained down as the cage collapsed. Damn you Yandame Hokage! Damn your spawn! Years I spent suppressing his intelligence and feeding his darkness with what little control I had. Biding my time to escape, all for not now. The beast roared in fury as the darkness began encroaching ever faster. It had gotten a chance that it didn't get with its previous containers, to suppress its container's intelligence when they were an infant so nobody would notice. But now it was pointless. Kyuubi would die, possibly for good this time, what with the Yandame seal, and even if it reformed, it still wouldn't have the other half of its chakra, that was forever locked away inside the stomach of the Shinigami. Slowly the Kyuubi felt its consciousness flickering as the darkness ate away at it. Finally, when only its head remained, it let loose one final roar of fury before it disappeared completely. Minutes earlier, Hai no Kuni side of the valley. Slowly the man with the Venus flytrap in two different sides of his face rose from the ground in front of the forest on the side of the valley that led to Konoha. He could only greet the sight before him with a blink of the eyes before they widened in shock and fear and a sense of dread descended upon him. Before him was a pair of boys. One had black hair and wore the typical Uchiha-style shirt. The other was the boy he had just been heading to inform his master about, Uzumaki Naruto, aka Namake's Naruto, aka Uchiha Naruto, aka his master's grandson. And currently the Uchiha had just shoved his lightning-covered fist into the chest of the blonde Jinchuriki. This was not good. Oh shit, don't panic, Madara-sama can still bring him back with the Rinnegan since he didn't die by bijou extraction via Geto Mazo, right? The white half asked nervously. Yes, but he will still not be happy, let's get this over with. The black half replied as they saw the Uchiha boy drop Naruto and dash off. Quickly the man melded back into the ground and reappeared beneath Naruto's body, picking it up bridal style. Trying to repress the shudder of fear that wanted to go down his spine, the man melded back into the ground with the body, intending to take it to his master. Behind the waterfall, hidden chamber. Uchiha Madara sat silently on an ancient-looking throne made of roots. He looked to be a living mummy, that was how old he was, at 96 years of age. For the past 30 years he had sat on this throne, reflecting on the past. There wasn't much else to do, especially when he became too moved very much without his body aching. He used to pass the time by reading from his library. The only reason he had any idea of the time passed was because he carefully regulated the growth of one of his mokotan trees, so that each year that passed, it had grown another foot. Right now it stood at 30 feet in the underground chamber. The library? Oh, that was something he truly prized. even more than the garden he grew with his mokutan where all his food came from. He even had a copy of the entire Uchiha clan library, and some originals of the more important scrolls that he neglected to leave them a copy of. But now, he couldn't do much else but sit and reflect on his memories of his family, and how he failed. Once he thought he could escape his hatred by immersing himself in the warmth and love he felt for his wife and child. But that had been foolish. He had grown soft, and because of that the ones he cared about were killed. He had let the warmth he felt for them to cloud his judgment, and for a single moment he forgot the times they lived in back then, and gone to meet his contact in person. It was pathetic, such a strong shinobi making such a mistake. He should have sent a shadow clone. It would have been perfectly capable of getting the information he needed. Madara would have continued his lamenting, as he waited for the plan to be completed so his younger body could be brought back and then he would finally enact Mugen Tsukuyomi. However, he was interrupted by a plant-like man emerging from the ground in front of his throne. He recognized his subordinate instantly, but he did not have a clue as to who the corpse in his arms was. The drawbacks of secluding yourself for 3 decades, you had no idea who the major or minor players in the current shinobi world were. He examined the bland boy with lightly tanned skin dress and a ragged, hideous orange jumpsuit that is drenched in blood, probably the entire blood contents of his body. Activating his Sharingan to glare at his subordinate and study his demeanor. He was nervous, extremely nervous. So whatever this boy meant, he assumed it would anger the old Uchiha. Finally he spoke in a voice cracked with age and disuse. Zetsu, it's 30 years since I went into seclusion. This had better be to tell me that the plan is going to commence soon. And who is this dead boy in your arms? Madara asked coldly. The now named Zetsu shivered under the gaze of the ancient Uchiha. He felt a weight settle in his stomach as he swallowed nervously before answering. Well, you see, Madara-sama. The plan isn't yet ready to be enacted, but Zetsu began, only to be cut off by Madara's cold voice and an intense burst of killing intent. Then why did you interrupt my seclusion when I specifically ordered not to be interrupted unless the plan commenced or it was something of the utmost importance occurred? Madara hissed in cold fury. Zetsu shifted nervously as he cleared his throat to reply. Ahem, well, you see, it doesn't have to do with the plan per se, but rather the continuance of the plan. You see, we uncovered something about the death of your family. Zetsu was cut off once more as another even more intense burst of killing intent. Choose your next words carefully, Zetsu. This is a sore subject with me, as you know, Madara warned with fury laced into every word. Once again Zetsu gulped before continuing. Well, we discovered from a lead picked up unwittingly that the day your family was killed, the Sannin, the students of the Sandaime Hokage, responded to sensing a barrier, where they found a mortally wounded woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, who begged them to help her son, who Senju Tsunade subsequently retrieved him from the tree he was hidden in. The woman introduced the two as Namikaze Hitomi and Namikaze Minato. Zetsu replied, praying that the words would interest Madara enough to let him continue. He was in luck. Madara blinked, then blinked again. Finally he leaned back in his chair and stopped the killing intent. Now he seemed to have forgotten about Naruto for now, more interested in the news his son had apparently survived. Well, what did you find? Get on with it. Madara ordered eagerly, a complete 180. Zetsu's sweat dropped slightly but continued nonetheless. We found out what happened to him, and suspected for some time. It's just your apprentice has kept us so busy gathering information everywhere but Konoha that we never got to check into it thoroughly. It also didn't help that the only information on his origins was an obscure mission report. Zetsu replied, the white half adding some humor onto the end. So what does that mean? It sounds almost as if you should have made the connection sooner but failed to. Is this the case? Madara asked in an emotionless voice. He wasn't angry per se, more frustrated. Zetsu nodded reluctantly. You see, Madara-sama, you never told us her surname. So we couldn't make the connection. Had we had the surname, we would have known long ago. Zetsu explained, earning a nod of agreement and understanding from Madara. Now just so you know, don't get your hopes up, your son is long dead, even though he did great things. However, he is beyond reach for the Rinnegan, Zetsu warned. For 1 second Madara felt angry at Zetsu for wasting his time, but that faded when he realized Zetsu wouldn't have come here without reason. This wasn't reason. He would have known this would not change the plans at all. The only thing that would change his mind would be if no, it couldn't be. He licked his lips before he spoke in a sorrowful tone. Tell me, you said it might change whether I wanted to complete the plan. Why is that? Madara asked, his mouth dry. Zetsu hesitated for a second, knowing what he was about to say would affect his master deeply. Because your son died fighting the Kyuubi when it was released from his wife's seal by the one we chose to be your successor. He was the Yondaime Hokage and died using the Shiki Fuijin, too, to seal half of it into himself and the Hack Fuin to seal the other half into a child. So he really is beyond the Rinnegan, and his wife is dead. However, Zetsu trailed off purposefully to get Madara to keep paying attention, as he seemed to be struggling to comprehend his plan had caused the death of his son. Zetsu was right about Madara. Currently he was reliving the moment he arrived at his home 30 years ago. His heart stopped, and his blood became ice in his veins. He felt as if he was amidst a sea of guilt and sorrow. But that one word was a lifeline that kept him afloat. Seeing he had his master's attention, Zetsu continued. As Yondaime, he became well known for his philosophy: never send another on a mission you would not be willing to go on yourself. So when it came time to seal the Kyuubi into a child, he didn't choose some random child. Zetsu trailed off, hoping Madara would catch on. And he did. The ancient Uchiha's eyes widened as they flashed to the blonde-haired boy's body in Zetsu's arms. As they gained an understanding glint filled his eyes. Then it turned to rage as he realized exactly who the boy with the blood-soaked jumpsuit and a fist-sized hole through his chest was. That boy is my grandson, isn't he? Would you care to explain to me how he ended up in the condition he is currently in? Madara asked with fury boiling inside of him. He found it hard to keep it in, as he looked at the body of the boy who was his grandson. He knew that he could probably bring him back, but it did not change the fact that he felt as if someone was stabbing him in the gut with a white-hot knife repeatedly. Such was the pain of the grief he felt, even if it wasn't rational. He had to fight himself from swearing vengeance upon the one who did this. The revelations of the past 15 minutes had shoved him, if only briefly, back into the light. Madara was determined to stay there. His actions, when in the darkness of his hatred, had led to the death of his son. Zetsu meanwhile was nervous of his master's reaction. His name is Uzumaki Naruto. As for how he got in this condition, we were on our way here when we arrived at the side of the valley that leads from Konoha. When we came up we saw two boys, both Konoha ninja, fighting. It appeared that your grandson got sent on a mission to stop his teammate Uchiha Sasuke from deserting Konoha to join another traitor who offered him power. We arrived in time to see him kill your grandson and immediately gathered his body so you may revive him. He didn't die by the Gedo Mazo, so there should be no issue. Zetsu concluded. Madara took a few deep breaths to calm himself before he could think clearly. Very well, Zetsu, but before that, I want to know everything you know about him before we do. He was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. You must surely know most if not all of his life up till now. For now, set him on the table. Madara ordered as he leaned back in his throne, nodding his head at the table off to the side where he ate dinner. Getting the message, Zetsu walked over to the table and set the boy down gently. Zetsu shuffled back to stand in front of Madara, clearing his throat before he began his tale. He told Madara of how Naruto's Jinchuriki status had been secretly leaked by a man named Danzo shortly after the Kyuubi was sealed in him, forcing the newly reinstated Sandaime, Sarutobi Hiruzen, to tell the citizens that it was the Yondaime's dying wish Naruto be seen as a hero, and when that failed, to make a law that forbid people from speaking of it in hopes Naruto having a chance at a semi-normal childhood where he could make friends. Zetsu also told him how they ignored it, and the adults and children old enough hated and feared Naruto as he grew up. How that fear had transferred to their children as well, and they in turn avoided him. Then Naruto turned to pranking to get attention, and proclaiming he'd be Hokage. He also told him of the events of his graduation, and the friend he made in Irika. By the time Zetsu finished, Madara was both furious and proud. He was furious at his grandson's treatment, and how his education was sabotaged by teachers unwilling to teach him, while favoring the bratty little Uchiha. The boy's notion that merely bearing the Uchiha name made him an elite was sickening. It was offensive to Madara, who, while being part of the head family, had worked hard for every single ounce of strength he ever got, instead of expecting it to be handed to him like this Sasuke. However, he was also immensely proud of his grandson for coming so far and doing so much with so little. Unlike him, his grandson never gave in to the feelings of hatred and lashed out. He persevered, and in the end held an enormous amount of potential. Although Zetsu told him about Naruto's life, he also ended up giving him the overview of what had been going on since his seclusion, particularly about the boy Zetsu had chosen to continue the Mugen Tsukuyomi plan for him. He didn't know what Zetsu was thinking, letting the boy witness the death of the girl he loved at the hands of his best friend. As for what happened with the boy Zetsu gave his eyes to, that was just bad luck there. The boy had gone past the point he would have wanted a wielder of his eyes to be at, even when he was in the darkness. The boy truly believed that he was a god. He felt especially bad for his female friend who stood by him even when she knew he was no longer the person she became friends with. Finally, having heard enough, Madara prepared to bring his grandson back. Madara grunted as he slowly stood up from his throne, his old bones creaking and protesting the movement. But he ignored it. He had family left, he could help his grandson, unlike his wife and son. While he walked slowly towards the table, his eyes darted to the blood on his grandson's clothing. That wasn't good. The outer path allowed him to bring back the dead, as in use the body as a beacon for the soul, and while it could heal the body of just about any injury. But there was a limit of what it could heal at once. For instance, the hole in his grandson's chest was simple enough. However, if the amount of blood he was seeing was any indication, he would also need to replace all his blood as well. In his current state, his body wasn't fit to do that much with the jutsu. He couldn't handle the amount of strain it would put on his chakra coils, let alone his eyes he took from that random uchiha. If he attempted to do such, it would only result in his death and his grandson remaining dead. If he had his original eyes from his brother, it may have been possible. But since he had taken these other eyes, it had taken him twice as much chakra and strain to use their powers. I hope that's not the case, but if it is, I need another option. Unfortunately, the only one that comes to mind ends up with me dead. However, if it means I can really and truly bring my grandson back and repay him even slightly for the harm I did to him, the life I took away from him and my son, then so be it, Madara thought with conviction. While giving his life was well and good, there were many variables to consider, such as his apprentice that was running around using his name. Zetsu told him that this Obito or Tobi wouldn't abort the plan for similar reasons Madara would not have yesterday. That was a problem, as after seeing his grandson's dead body and hearing about his son's death because of the plan, he realized that seeing his family again through an illusion would be worthless, a pale imitation. The world he created would be perfect. That was the problem. It was the imperfections that made life worthwhile. He saw that now. So he had to ensure there was a way to stop the monster he'd let loose on the world. He wouldn't be there to do it, so he would have to entrust the task to his grandson. He'd proven he was a better person than Madara. He could defeat the Uchiha curse of hatred when Madara could not. He just needed to make sure Naruto was as prepared as possible. He knew that if Kyuubi's yang half didn't go to the stomach of the Shinigami where its yin half was with his son, then it would most likely reform in about 4 years. But the difference was now none of his chakra reserves would be focused on keeping the fox at bay, meaning it would be about easily 25 times as large as before he was revived. In short, he would have about as much chakra as a Bijou, about 1.5 times more than he and Hashirama had at the height of their power. In addition, chakra control would actually be possible for him without the seal leaking the Kyuubi chakra into his system constantly. But there was still the question of how Naruto would prepare. He himself wouldn't be around to train his grandson, and Zetsu still needed to keep up appearances so as not to arouse suspicion from Tobi. Suddenly his mind flashed to what he had been told about both his son's and grandson's mentor, the Toad Sage Jiraiya, one of Little Hiruzen's students. Yes, that might work. Shaking his head, Madara realized that he had by now made it to the table. Quickly he flashed through a set of hand seals to activate the mystic palm technique to make sure his assumption was correct. Slowly his palms passed over his grandson's body encased in green chakra. His heart and stomach dropped and a frown overtook his face as he realized he was right. Zetsu noticed his master frown as he examined the body. What could it mean? The injury couldn't be that bad, right? Surely it could be fixed. Finally, after a few minutes of Madara's frown increasing, he spoke up. Madara-sama, is something the matter? You look like someone just kicked you, puppy. Zetsu asked/stated. Madara's mouth twitched as if he found the statement amusing, before speaking to the plan man. Yes, there is Zetsu. You see, the Rinnegan will take enough energy and strain to heal just his chest wound. However, he is also missing over 90% of his blood. To heal both at once with the jutsu is impossible. Which means the only option is to give him a transfusion of blood just before the rebirth jutsu is performed. Not even a few seconds can pass in between. Madara replied. At this, Zetsu's eyes widened. He was not stupid. You would need to be a relative for that, closer the better. Also, transfusing that much blood would result in a person dying. The only relative was Madara himself. Zetsu knew his master, and his love for family. It was a trait Naruto shared with him, when it came to those Naruto saw as surrogate family. There was no doubt his master planned to do it. What are your last orders, Madara-sama? Zetsu asked seriously. Madara actually smiled at this. He expected Zetsu to grasp the situation right away. Good, you realize what is about to happen. First things first, before I begin, take my grandson's bloody jumpsuit and leave it where you found him. Make it look like it fell off, this way people will think he died. Madara began, surprising Zetsu. Before he could comment, Madara continued. After that, all my orders are to be carried out after I die. First, seal my entire library into a storage scroll keyed to my grandson's blood. Also seal inside with the library the scroll that holds the container with my original eyes, just in case Naruto needs them later on. Then deliver it and my grandson to Jiraiya of the Sannin. Make sure he understands the gravity of keeping my grandson's survival as close to the chest as possible. Also inform him he now has 4 years to get Naruto ready. Madara continued, making sure Zetsu was paying attention before continuing. You are to serve my grandson after this, but don't give them information on Akatsuki's specific members until the time to actually fight comes. That way, you maintain your cover. Also, see what you and Naruto can do for that Konan girl. She has been affected more than most by my machinations. Madara finished. Zetsu nodded with reluctance, knowing that his master wouldn't be dissuaded from this path. Seeing this, Madara nodded before he ripped off his grandson's jumpsuit and handed it to the plan man, who immediately sunk into the floor, knowing his job was to believably fake Naruto's death. When Zetsu left, Madara looked down at his grandson intently. He hadn't mentioned to Zetsu what he expected to happen with this particular combination of jutsu. It was a calculated risk. The big advantage was that if it did work, if his hypothesis was correct, his grandson would soon be a 100% pure Uchiha. Having Madara's blood, which was 100% Uchiha DNA, inside Naruto's only 1/8 Uchiha body, at the time he did the resurrection, would purge his body of all non-Uchiha DNA, as the resurrection fixed the rejection problem that would normally come with implanting another's DNA into someone. This way, his grandson would be able to awaken the Sharingan, whereas it was unlikely he would before. Another bonus was his previous DNA would have had trouble surviving without Kyuubi's chakra suffusing his body. The new DNA would have no such problems. With his plan now made, Madara created a shadow clone using nearly 90% of his chakra. The idea was simple. Madara only needed a small amount of chakra to transfer his blood to Naruto, and if he attempted to do that before using his chakra to use the revival jutsu, he wouldn't be able to complete the revival. However, if he had the shadow clone do the revival, then he could focus only on the blood transfusion and only need to worry about remaining alive for the seconds it would take for his clone to do the revival. Flashing through hand seals, Madara placed one hand over his heart and the other over his grandson's. Within seconds, Madara felt the jutsu take effect as the feeling of blood being drawn from his body began and continued, with him becoming continuously lightheaded. Now the numbness was setting in, his legs nearly gave out and his eyes drooped. He had to split his chakra between the jutsu and stimulating his organs to keep them functioning as he felt them slowly shut down one by one. Most important was the heart, brain, and lungs. Finally, after 1 minute, the ancient Uchiha let out a sigh as the jutsu ended and he wobbled where he stood, before finally collapsing so that he sat down on the ground, his breathing shallow as his old lungs struggled to draw one more breath and his heart weakly fluttered. Immediately after he collapsed, he heard his clone call out the jutsu to bring his grandson back, even as his vision began going black and his hearing faded. He had one last thought before his body stopped functioning. "I did it, Hitomi-chan, I beat the darkness and saved our grandson, I know he'll make us proud," Madara thought before his eyes closed, and his breathing stopped. Beside him there was a faint pop as his clone dispersed. Now all that was left in the room was a young boy in his t-shirt and green boxers with orange swirl patterns. Around his neck hung a necklace with a small green crystal. He had pale skin and spiky blonde hair. Currently the boy wasn't moving, until finally he drew in a great shuddering breath as he shot up in his spot on the table, his onyx-colored eyes going wide as he looked around in confusion. Where am I? The last thing I remember is Sasuke killing mice. This the afterlife? Naruto asked in confusion as he looked around. His eyes eventually fell on the old man lying still on the floor. Slowly he got up off the table with his body feeling oddly stiff. When he finally finished getting up, Naruto knelt down and checked the old man's neck for a pulse. Just as he realized there wasn't one, someone spoke from behind him. "You won't find a pulse. He gave his life to bring you back from the dead." The voice spoke, its tones alternating. Naruto's heart leapt into his throat as he jumped to his feet and spun around. Standing behind him was a man-plant thing, with half the face being black and the other white with some sort of Venus flytrap on his shoulders. Most telling was the black cloak with red clouds on it. "Akatsuki. Where am I? Who are you? Who's he? Are you here to capture me?" Naruto asked rapid fire, his mind reeling from seeing the apparent Akatsuki member standing there so nonchalantly. Zetsu grinned at the boy's confusion. "Oh, he's so cute when he's confused, but I guess we should answer. You're currently behind the waterfall at the Valley of the End. We're called Zetsu. I'm White Zetsu, he's Black Zetsu. We are not here to capture you. Our loyalty to Akatsuki is secondary to the man who brought you back. As for who he is, he's your grandfather," Zetsu informed the blonde Jinchuriki, the white half lacking any tact. Or rather conveniently forgetting it. Naruto opened his mouth to say something, but he couldn't think of anything. He had been dead? The old man was his grandfather? Denial immediately set in. He was not that stupid. It would be extremely rare to just happen to find some long-lost grandfather that just happened to bring him back from the dead. Still, he knew he had been hit in the chest with a chidori. He took a look down at his chest, and sure enough there was a hole in his shirt, but where the wound should be he saw only smooth skin. Naruto looked up and stared at the strange plant man, silently asking for an explanation. The plant man could only sigh. This was going to be a long explanation. Chapter end. Valley of the End. "Down there, Kakashi, we better hurry. There's the smell of blood, and it's Naruto's. It smells like there might be enough for him to have bled out, but we might get lucky," a small brown pug said to the man next to it. Said man was fairly tall and wore a standard Konoha Jonin attire. He also wore a face mask on the lower half of his face, and his Konoha Hittite slanted over his left eye. His hair was silver and spiky, seeming to defy gravity. Currently he had a worried look on his face under his mask, with his one visible eye showing the emotion freely. Oh, now please don't let me have failed again. Not now, and not with Naruto of all people. The Cyclops thought in sorrow, worry for his favorite, though he would never admit it, student. Heading the dog's words, the Jonin dashed off, following his Niken to the source of the blood. He paled considerably when he saw where Pakken stopped. The Konoha nin fell to his knees as he looked at the sight before him. Lying on the ground, in a tattered but still recognizable hideous orange jumpsuit, was his student. The source of the blood was obvious. It was a fist-sized hole slightly charred around the entrance that he recognized only too well. It was the wound of a Chidori. Kakashi picked the body up and cradled it to him as he began to weep openly, tears falling from his single eye. At the moment it felt as if someone had shoved a Chidori through his chest, the emotional pain was so bad. Kakashi threw his head back and looked at the sky as he let loose a roar of anguish. I should have been there. He yelled in frustration, flashbacks of all the other people he let down swimming before him. Looking down at the ground, Kakashi spoke once more, this time in near a whisper. I should have been faster, I should have done 100 different things. Train him instead of Sasuke during the Chunin exams. Never taught Sasuke the Chidori. Told him about his parents, Kakashi whispered, so quietly his Niken almost didn't hear him. Pakken set a gentle paw on Kakashi's arm to try and comfort him. You couldn't have known he'd have to do this mission, it's not your fault, the pug began, only to be cut off by a self-depreciating laugh from Kakashi. Oh, but isn't it? Not directly, no, more from inaction. He was my sensei's only son. Minato-sensei did so much for me, I should have done more for his son. Kakashi replied simply, as he stood up and began dashing back to the village, having no intention of going after Sasuke with Naruto dead. Right now, Naruto was more important, even in death. Pakken dashed right after him, deciding it was best to follow after the copy nin. Neither noticed as Setsu emerged from the ground they had just been at. That Narikawari no Jutsu, worked like a charm. White Setsu gloated, getting a grunt of agreement from his other half. All the same, we'll keep up the technique until we can take the body after the funeral, wouldn't want people to get suspicious. Black Setsu replied. Yeah, you're right. Oh well, we better go back, Madara-sama has surely finished by now, we'll need to get Naruto to the perverted toad soon, before word gets to him that the kid was dead, although he might already know he died briefly, that toad scroll would let him know if the person died, and if they came back. White Setsu suggested. With Kakashi and Pakken. Kakashi and Pakken had been traveling in silence for a few minutes when Kakashi finally broke it. You know, it's funny. I spent all that time during the Chunin exams training Sasuke, when it would have been better spent teaching Naruto. I just wanted to let him learn the basics, how they were supposed to be done first, as opposed to jutsu. It was always my intention to teach him everything I could. After all, he showed far more promise than Sasuke ever did. Kakashi told the Niken, getting a look of shock and surprise from Pakken. From his brief meeting with the blonde, Pakken hadn't got that vibe at all. He'd always thought Kakashi was more inclined to teach Sasuke. To hear he had planned to focus so much on Naruto was a shock. What do you mean? My impression was that he was just a loud-mouthed kid with a lot of chakra and no offense. Pakken replied. Surprisingly, that only got a chuckle from Kakashi. Yeah, well, there's a good reason for that. His education was sabotaged when they taught the most basic things such as tactics and history and taijutsu. By the time Irika came in, Naruto was not interested in them, too stuck in his, I can do it myself approach. But if he ever mastered the basics, he would be the perfect student. He learned a B-rank Kenjutsu in a matter of hours. On top of that, he could use the shadow clones to train because of the effect of memory transfer and his massive reserves. I just needed him to gain some more intellect before I could teach him as much as I wanted. Kakashi explained. The rest of their trip was made in silence, neither one really feeling like saying anything. Finally, when the village gates came into sight, Kakashi slowed down. Eventually, he stopped altogether. It would probably be best for me to shunshin directly to Tsunade-sama's office, that way nobody sees the body yet. Kakashi reasoned, getting a nod from the Niken. His mind made up, the copy nin put his hand in a half-rammed seal, disappearing in a poof of smoke. Hokage's office. Inside her office sat the Godame Hokage, Senju Tsunade. She was a beautiful woman that stood at about 5 feet 4 inches with pale skin and long blonde hair that she kept in 2 ponytails with bangs framing her heart-shaped face with a rhombus mark on her forehead. She wore a sleeveless gray kimono top tied shut with a black obi. Her breasts were extremely large, and she wore tight blue pants that stopped at the top of her calves. On her feet she wore high-heeled sandals. Over her kimono top she wore a green haori with a red circle in the back with the kanji for gamble in black inside the circle. Senju Tsunade was having what most would call an amazing day. This morning she bought a winning lottery ticket, and won enough money to pay off all her debts from her time outside Konoha. She had then proceeded to win every game she went to play at a nearby game hall full of slot machines during her lunch break. All in all, it was an amazing day for most people. However, for Tsunade it spelled an extremely bad omen. For every time she hit a winning streak, something bad happened. Her worry was further compounded by when her teacup had cracked while doing some paperwork. She suspected it had to do with the mission she gave to those genin, most importantly Naruto. She did after all send them after a team that had thrashed 2 of her jonin. So she sent the Suna team as backup to help them. But still she had worried, so for good measure, when he arrived back, she had sent Kakashi out to help. He was only too eager once he heard what the mission entailed, thus, now she waited for his return. I hope he gets there in time. God, I hope that stupid necklace doesn't take another one. I will never forgive myself if it does. Naruto, please be okay, she thought to herself. No sooner had she thought this, than a plume of smoke erupted in the center of her room, signifying the use of the Shunshin no Jutsu, too. The Godane waited impatiently for the smoke to clear. But when it did, her heart stopped as it seemed as if someone stabbed her with a white-hot knife and wrenched it around. It was Kakashi, and he had Naruto all right. But Naruto had a large hole in his chest, and there was no indication of him breathing at all. If that wasn't enough, Naruto's signature jumpsuit was painted red with his blood. "Nuh!" she screamed in agony, as she broke down sobbing. All Kakashi could do was stand there awkwardly as he waited for the Hokage to calm down. He prayed to Kami she didn't break down like she did the last time she lost someone. If she did, it would no doubt give Danzo an opening to try and force her out so he could take the title of Hokage. While he waited, he created a shadow clone to go ask Sakura to meet him at Training Ground 7 later. She would need to be told before word spread. He had a feeling that his final student would feel extremely guilty about Naruto's death, what with asking him to bring back Sasuke. Later, Training Ground. Sakura walked into the training ground at a regular pace, curious what her sensei wanted to talk about. She had heard on her way here that the retrieval team had arrived back a few hours ago. She wondered if the mission was successful. Haruno Sakura was a petite young girl of 12 and she stood at 4 foot, wore a red shipao dress with white circular designs, with or without short sleeves, with a zipper, tight dark green shorts, and a forehead protector which she used to hold back her bright pink hair. When she entered the training ground, Sakura immediately noticed her sensei standing in front of the black memorial stone where the names of all the Konoha ninja to ever fall in the line of duty were engraved. The copy nin's posture was slumped slightly, and judging from the position of his head, he was staring intently at one name in particular. Sakura suddenly got a cold, ominous feeling in the pit of her stomach, like something bad was about to happen. It was the same feeling she got when Sasuke-kun was leaving the village. She shook off the feeling with slight difficulty. Putting on her typical smile, she strode forward. "Hey Kakashi-sensei, you're on time for once," she called as she walked over towards the copy nin. "Cha, about time." Inner Sakura put her 2 cents in. Kakashi didn't do anything to acknowledge her words, simply kept staring at the memorial stone. "Hey, is Naruto back yet? Did they succeed?" Sakura asked to her sensei's back. Finally Sakura reached his side and saw that her sensei's one eye looked sad as it looked at one name in particular. Following his gaze, that caught her by surprise. "Namake's Minato? The Yondaime? Why is he staring at his name out of all of them?" Sakura thought to herself. As if reading her thoughts, Kakashi finally spoke. "He was my sensei. I always come here to talk to him and my other teammates. I find myself staying longer and longer, soon enough I'm late," he explained quietly. Sakura's eyes widened at his admission. So that's why he was always late, she thought to herself. Kakashi took a deep breath before speaking again. "I hope today he might actually respond, give me some his wisdom like he used to. Give me the fortitude to say what needed to be said. I guess for once, I got a reply," Kakashi told her cryptically. Now Sakura was getting worried. Kakashi was speaking very ominously. "Sensei, what are you saying? You're not making sense," Sakura replied nervously. Kakashi took a deep breath before turning to look at her with his one good eye. "Earlier today Uzumaki Naruto fell in battle against Uchiha Sasuke. I'm sorry Sakura, but Naruto is dead," he told her sadly. Sakura's mind froze at that. It couldn't be. Not Naruto. Unbidden memories of their time of him swam through her mind. "And my future dream is to be the greatest Hokage. Then the whole village will stop disrespecting me and start treating me like I'm somebody. Somebody important. Don't underestimate me. I don't quit and I don't run. You can act tough all you want. You're not gonna scare me off. No way. I don't care if I get stuck as a genin for the rest of my life. I'll still be Hokage someday. I'm not gonna run away, I never go back on my word. That's my ninja way. Don't you worry about a thing Sakura, we'll bring Sasuke back. It's the promise of a lifetime." Sakura dropped to her knees and began sobbing uncontrollably as her mind finally processed the situation. I should have never made him make that promise. Maybe if I hadn't, he wouldn't have tried so hard. He might be alive, she cried. Kakashi could only kneel down next to her and rub her back consolingly. Hideout at the Valley of the End. Naruto stared at the weird plant man before him. The story he was just told was unbelievable. His father being the Yondaime, and his grandfather Uchiha Madara, who was apparently the strongest Uchiha in history, miles ahead of Itachi. On top of this, being told his grandfather was alive all this time, and apparently didn't know about him until today. Yet he had given his life for him, to bring him back from the dead. Oh, and he had left Naruto his library that could upstage the Hokage's library. Despite that, the facts pointed to it being the truth. For some reason Naruto could think better now, and now he was capable of putting the facts together, whereas before he would have needed to go with his gut. Fact number 1, he knew he had been hit with a Chidori right through the chest. Fact 2, he no longer had that hole. Fact 3, he was told he had died, and thus the Kyuubi was either dispersed to reform, or permanently dead. Fact 4, he couldn't feel a single trace of Kyuubi's chakra. Fact 5, when the plant man showed him a mirror, his appearance was different. Most notable was his eyes were now onyx black, and his whisker marks were gone. Less noticeable was the fact that his skin was no longer light tan, instead it was pale, almost like Sasuke's except maybe a shade darker than his. Last was the fact he could swear that his face had become narrower, and he had grown a couple inches. So in the end, he was forced to conclude that the story was indeed true, as he highly doubted this was an Akatsuki plot. If it was, they wouldn't have bothered letting him wake up, opting to remove his bijou right there. Finally, having come to terms with what he had been told, he asked the only question he could. So what now? What happens with me now? Naruto asked quietly. Setsu chuckled. Simple, we drop you off with your perverted godfather. The one you know as Jiraiya. He'll teach you in the next 4 years so you can go toe-to-toe with Akatsuki. To the rest of the world save the Hokage, you'll be dead. We even gave them a fake corpse which will stand up to all the regular tests. Setsu replied. At hearing Jiraiya was his godfather, Naruto scowled slightly. If Ero-sennin was my godfather, how come he wasn't there for me, and why'd he pretend he didn't know who I was? Naruto asked in anger, causing White Setsu to snicker and Black Setsu to scoff. At first it was to use his spy network to ensure there was no way IWA could find out who your father was. Then when you were 2 years old and he was about to come get you, Snakeface defected and he needed to focus his attention on him. Finally, when you were 6 years old, Orochimaru left us and Jiraiya first heard of us. That took up the rest of the time until the Chunin exams. Setsu explained. Naruto seemed to calm down slightly at this, although he still didn't seem exactly happy. So why didn't he tell me who he was? He asked again. Setsu simply raised an eyebrow. You're kidding, right? Would you have paid even half as much attention to what he was teaching you if he had? I mean, what with the fact you weren't supposed to know who your parents were till you were Chunin? All he could have told you was he was your godfather, but he wasn't allowed to tell you who your parents were, yeah. That would have went over well, White Setsu replied sarcastically. Naruto gave a slightly sheepish chuckle as he rubbed the back of his head. The plant man was probably right on that one. Knowing him, he would have acted like a brat and then gotten his ass kicked in the finals. Not to mention he wouldn't have been able to summon Gamabunta during the invasion. Seeing the boy had now gotten over his previous issue, Black Setsu cleared his throat as he held up and scroll. If you're ready, we should probably get going. It's been about 2 hours since you died. The Toad Sage has no doubt been informed right about now, and we would do well to leave before he moves from where he is in Tanzaki-gai. Black Setsu suggested. Naruto gave a nod before walking over to the plant man, who placed a hand on his shoulder before both began to sink into the ground. Jiraiya's hotel room, Tanzaki-gai. Jiraiya the Toad Sage was sitting in his room trying to finish his last Ika book before he headed to Konoha to tell Naruto about the training trip he had planned. He had just finished the current chapter when a plume of smoke erupted in the center of his room. When it cleared, it revealed a surprising sight. The 2 elders of the Toad clan, Fukusaku and Shima. Pa, what are you 2 doing here? He asked quizzically. The 2 toads seemed to be worked up about something. Jiraiya-chan, we just found out that about 3 hours ago Naruto-chan's name disappeared from the Summoner's Stone, Shima cried out. At this, Jiraiya sat up straighter and he fixed the 2 with a serious gaze. Are you sure? It's not a mistake? He asked worriedly. It was Fukusaku who answered. We don't know, because a half hour later his name apparently reappeared. We're not sure what's going on. This is the first time something like this has happened, Fukusaku exclaimed. At that, Jiraiya's jaw dropped. What in the he was cut off when he noticed a pair of figures emerging from the ground. One of them was very familiar, although he appeared to look slightly different. The other, however, caused him to tense up and get ready to attack. Jiraiya was about to say something to him when all of a sudden he felt an immense pain, like someone was stabbing him repeatedly in the gut, taking his breath away. The other occupants of the room saw what happened. Naruto had walked over and punched Jiraiya in the balls, causing Shima to gasp, and White Setsu to snicker. "That's for not telling me my TUSAN was the yondaime," he huffed at the man who was currently bent over holding his package. At the words the boy spoke, Jiraiya's eyes widened even further than they did when he got punched. "Feel better now, kid?" White Setsu asked sarcastically. Naruto actually grinned in response. "Yeah, actually I do," the blonde replied with a cheeky grin. Jiraiya meanwhile had managed to catch his breath finally and spoke. What the hell's going on here? Why was Naruto with you?" he asked the Akatsuki man. Black Setsu inclined his head before speaking. "Simple, Jiraiya-san. We worked for Naruto-san's grandfather, and we recently discovered the fact that he was Naruto's grandfather. When we went to his hideout at the Valley of the End, we arrived in time to see Naruto-san die at the hands of Uchiha Sasuke. From there we took his body to Madara-sama, who upon learning he was his grandson, used a jutsu to bring Naruto back at the cost of his own life." The black half explained to the now gaping Sannin and summons. There was silence for a minute as everyone just stood there awkwardly before Fukusaku broke the silence. "Well, that would certainly explain why his name disappeared then reappeared on the summoner's tablet," the summon remarked blandly, as if this happened every day. The wonders of old age, composure in weird situations. Jiraiya continued to gape before something occurred to him. "Wait, did you say Madara? As in Uchiha Madara?" the Toad Sage asked in shock. He received a nod in response from Zetsu. Jiraiya finally pulled himself together and took stock of the situation. "Alright, thanks for bringing him and all, but if you could please leave, I need to sort this out and I'm sure the scroll will explain things well enough," the white-haired man suggested cautiously, eager to have his room clear of Akatsuki members. Zetsu gave one last nod before he sunk back into the ground, tossing the 2 scrolls to the sage as he did. As soon as the plant man was out of sight, Jiraiya looked at the 2 scrolls in his hands and set down the one that was a storage scroll, moving to the one that was apparently a letter. He began to read it, and as he did, his eyes got wider and wider. Although at one point he did give a slightly perverted giggle, for reasons Naruto didn't even want to know. Finally, a few minutes later, Jiraiya had thoroughly read the letter and was now contemplating its contents. Naruto meanwhile was standing awkwardly along with the summons. Eventually Jiraiya looked up. The first one he spoke to was Fukusaku. "You got it, Jiraiya-chan," Fukusaku replied before both summons disappeared in a plume of smoke. When they disappeared, Jiraiya let loose a weary sigh. "And now for the hard and potentially life-threatening part," Jiraiya muttered, causing Naruto to get confused. His face scrunched up in confusion as he considered all the things that could mean. He was spared this when Jiraiya finished his thought. "Telling Tsunade that you're not dead. Come on, brat, better to get this over with quick, like ripping of a bandage." Jiraiya sighed. Naruto gave a nod as he watched Jiraiya gathering his stuff, and followed after him when he exited via the window. Konoha, a few hours later. Tsunade took another sip of sake as she pondered on Naruto's death. She knew that the Elder Council was going to throw a hissy fit about how reckless she was to send him on that mission, but they would have thrown an even bigger one had she not made an attempt to retrieve the Uchiha. So they could go to hell for all she cared. She was broken out of her musings by a familiar voice coming from the open window to her right. "My mate Tsuheim, you look like someone just drowned your puppy. What's got you so down?" Jiraiya's voice asked jokingly from the spot where he was crouched in the window. Tsunade resisted the urge to beat the hell out of him, reasoning that he didn't know of Naruto's death. She took another sip of sake, ignoring the question for a second. Finally she let loose a weary sigh before she began speaking haltingly. "Jiraiya, I sent Naruto on a mission to retrieve Uchiha Sasuke didn't come back. Jiraiya, he's dead," she told her fellow Sannin, waiting for the verbal lashing to begin, tears welling in her eyes. She waited. And waited. Then finally he cleared his throat. "Here it comes. I deserve it though," she thought sadly with her head down. "Hey Naruto, why didn't you tell me you were dead?" he asked in mock anger. This caused Tsunade's head to whip towards him with a half-angry, half-confused glare. The glare froze when another voice spoke from the window on her other side. "I don't know, first I heard of it, but you gotta admit, I look pretty good for a corpse arrow senin." Naruto's voice came from her left, laughter barely restrained in his voice. Tsunade's head whipped around so fast that for a second Jiraiya was worried she broke her neck. Tsunade stared at the boy before her crouched similarly to Jiraiya. He was currently dressed in his usual black shirt he wore under his jacket, along with a simple pair of shinobi pants, the necklace she gave him hanging from his neck. He looked slightly different, his whisker marks were gone and his eyes were slightly narrower with them being black now, and his skin paler. he even looked like he grew a bit and lost some baby fat. But it was obviously still him. Tsunade's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates for a second before the sight in front of her reached her brain, and she launched herself forward, grabbing the blonde into a bone-crushing hug, inadvertently pressing his head into her cleavage. "Naruto! I thought you were dead. Kakashi even brought back your body," she cried as she held her fellow blonde close. Jiraiya let them stay that way for a minute until he realized Naruto was turning slightly blue. The cause was obvious and Jiraiya couldn't help but feel slightly jealous. Tsunade was suffocating him with her breasts. Tsunadeheim, I think you should let him go before he dies for real," he commented, drawing an owlish blink from his teammate before she looked down and realized what he meant. She immediately dropped Naruto, letting him collapse to the floor as she sat back in her chair with the almost unnoticeable blush of embarrassment. "So what the hell is going on here? I know the body Kakashi brought and passed all the tests of authentication," Tsunade asked, switching to Hokage mode as she fixed the two with her gaze. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, Jiraiya and Naruto sat down in the two chairs in front of her desk. "Well, you remember when we found Minato and his mother?" Jiraiya asked. This earned him a confused nod. Well, apparently his father wasn't dead like we assumed. He was simply someone she didn't think it was a good idea mentioning to Konoha Ninja, and he was alive all these years. A subordinate of his found Naruto outside his base at the Valley of the End, and brought Naruto to him, where he used a combination of a blood transfusion jutsu and a resurrection jutsu to bring him back. Jiraiya said, purposefully leaving out Madara's name, hoping Tsunade didn't notice. Apparently Tsunade wasn't the only one with bad luck. Tsunade's eyes narrowed at the way Jiraiya avoided telling her his grandfather's name. It was obvious he was pretty sure she would freak out about it. "And his grandfather's name was?" she asked impatiently. Jiraiya took a deep breath before replying. "Uchiha Madara," the pervert said with a resigned tone. Tsunade's eyes widened before they narrowed dangerously. "I see. So where is Madara now?" she asked with an edge. She was taken aback when it was Naruto who answered, and he had a glare directed at her with an edge in his voice. "Dead. His body was there when I woke up. He used 90% of his blood supply and all of his chakra to bring me back. In other words, he gave his life to resurrect me," Naruto replied. The reply surprised and effectively shut up whatever insults she might have thrown. "Anyways, so here's the situation. Naruto was actually dead for a half hour. The way Madara used to resurrect him purged all non-Uchiha DNA in him. In other words, he is the last pure-blood Uchiha loyal to Konoha," Jiraiya told her with a perverted giggle. This caused Tsunade to groan, surprising Naruto as she seemed to know why Jiraiya was giggling. Is there something I should know? He did the same thing while reading the letter," Naruto put in. Tsunade nodded while pinching the bridge of her nose. "Yes, there is. Despite him being banished, Madara's family was still the head family. Sasuke's family was a steward family of sorts, but they have been in charge for 3 generations before Sasuke, so most people forgot this. But you see, the true head family that Madara was from has been the head family since the clan was founded," Tsunade explained. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this. "Okay, so I am the Uchiha clan heir, and have been since birth. What does that have to do with Ero-sen laughing?" he asked. Tsunade let out another sigh. "Because of an old practice from the warring clans period. It carried over into the ninja village system. It's why polygamy isn't illegal, simply rare. It's for clans with bloodlines to preserve them," Tsunade explained. At this, Naruto began to catch on. Surprisingly, he'd found his mind worked miles better than it used to. "Polygamy, let me guess. To preserve the head family line, I'm required to have more than one wife. How many are we talking about, and why is the head family so important?" the blonde asked in a slightly resigned, slightly curious tone. "Why are you acting as if this is a bad thing, Gaki? You get to have a harem and you got the perfect excuse, you have to," Jiraiya exclaimed with a perverted grin as he imagined all the research this provided. Tsunade growled at the white-haired man's words, however she smirked at Naruto's response. "Because I've seen what happens when an Uchiha is on the market. Fangirls are vicious," Naruto replied. Jiraiya gave a shudder at those words. Even he didn't like fangirls. Clearing her throat, Tsunade spoke up. "Well, as for how many, at least 3. As for why the head family is so important, they were the head family for a reason. Ever since the clan's founding, their Sharingan has been particularly potent. They had such potent eyes that it was said if they had the right affinities, and put enough training into it, they could copy elemental bloodlines like the Hayatan of that Haku boy you said you met," Tsunade informed him. At this, Naruto blinked a few times because he remembered Kakashi making a point to tell them that the Sharingan was incapable of copying bloodline limits. He knew Sasuke couldn't. Oh, the irony, the so-called Uchiha elite couldn't copy bloodlines, but the Dobe might be able to. They're a bitch slap from karma to Sasuke if there's ever been one. Huh, that's interesting to know, Tsunadeheim. That changes my plans. I think we will spend the last few months of his training going around to find people able to use sub-elements he has the proper affinities for and copy some of the jutsu. That will also help him create new ones. Jiraiya said, mostly to himself. Shaking himself out of his thoughts, Jiraiya looked outside and saw that the sun was getting close to setting. He stood up and motioned to Naruto to do the same. Well, we better get going. I guess we'll see you in 4 years, although I will send the odd toad with a report or a request, he told the Hokage. Tsunade stood up and nodded before she leaned forward and pulled Naruto into a light hug. You better come back strong enough to whip the pervert's ass, Gaki, she told the other blonde. Naruto nodded with a grin while Jiraiya gave an indignant hey. Tsunade let Naruto go while Jiraiya was muttering about disrespectful apprentices. Finally, Jiraiya felt the pull of a reverse summon and placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder. See ya later, Bachan, Naruto called as they disappeared in a plume of smoke, a chair passing through where they'd just been. Konoha Cemetery, 2 weeks later. It always seems to rain at these shinobi funerals, why is that? Kakashi wondered to himself as he stared up at the dark gray sky as it deposited its contents onto the black-clad people below. It's as if even the heavens weep for them, he thought. He was currently standing in a line of people. Unlike at the Sandame's funeral, there weren't rows upon rows of people. Only those who knew Naruto were here. Kakashi and Sakura were there as the remaining members of Team 7. The other rookies along with Team 9 were there, along with the clan heir's parents, people who knew exactly who Naruto was. Tucci and Ayam were there as well, along with the senseis of the rookie teams and Team 9. Besides that, there was also the Konohamaru Corps. Ibiki and Enko were there from the TNI. Izumo and Kotetsu, the Eternal Gate Guards, were also there. Surprisingly, there was also the Suna siblings there as well. Finally, there was the Hokage and her assistant Shizen. Tsunade was currently at the podium, and she was speaking to the crowd. Uzumaki Naruto was many things. Hyperactive, a knucklehead, and obnoxious. But he was also brave, kind, and fiercely loyal to his friends. He died how I am sure he wanted to, fighting for what he believed in. He may be dead, but we can still do something for him. We can strive to uphold the will of fire he so embodied, and which my sensei and grandfather believed in so much, Tsunade said to the crowd. Currently most of them were solemn, not showing emotions. The few exceptions were Hinata and Sakura, who were both crying silently, and the Konohamaru Corps, who were letting out muffled sobs. Although Hinata and Sakura were crying for different reasons, although both had to do with regret. Sakura was crying over the fact that she thought Naruto's death was at least partially her fault because of how hard he tried to bring Sasuke back. Hinata because she never got to tell him how she felt about him. With Sakura, she was currently thinking over what she wanted to do from here. After all, she was the last member of her team still in Konoha. She had already gone and begged Tsunade to become her sensei, so that she would never be too weak to be helpful again. She had enough of sitting back and letting her friends fight for her. But she still hadn't figured out what she wanted to do with that strength. However, Tsunade's words gave her an idea. As soon as she was done speaking, Tsunade and Shizen turned to the coffin and placed a white flower on top. From there the crowd moved forward and began to place the flowers down one by one. Kakashi and Sakura were among the first. As the two stood side by side in front of the coffin, Sakura decided to share her revelation with Kakashi. Sensei, I found out what I'm going to do. I'm going to do what Naruto would have done. I'm going to do whatever it takes to pull Sasuke from the darkness he is in and bring him back to Konoha, she said quietly. At this, Kakashi could only frown. While he didn't agree with her, he would rather put him in the ground like any other Nukenin. He knew she wouldn't be persuaded otherwise. She and Tsunade-sama had a lot in common. That means I'll have to go along with it, if only so she doesn't get herself killed. But I'll make no promises about saving Sasuke, he thought solemnly. However, on the outside he turned to her with an eye smile. Then I suppose I'm going to have to help you out with that, aren't I? He asked/stated, causing her to give her first small smile in a while. If only she knew that Naruto didn't give a damn about Sasuke except perhaps extracting a pound of flesh from him. Mayaboku, same time. Naruto was sweating heavily as he ran across through the jungle he and Jiraiya were using as a training ground. He was currently wearing clothes similar to his visit with Tsunade. Over the past few weeks he had been working on nothing but upping his physical strength and speed, as he was pretty sure that's why he lost to Sasuke. He was faster. However, Naruto was determined to be even faster. He wanted to develop his own speed technique like his father, only based on pure speed. Jiraiya told him that first off his father started by increasing his physical speed to build up his reaction time. Naruto also figured that when he awakened the Sharingan, it would only be even better if he were to get where he could predict his opponent's movements slightly without it. And also take away the problem Sasuke had with Lee of not being able to react to his speed even though he could see his moves. He was pleasantly surprised to find that he kept a little bit of the healing factor from being a Jinchuriki, just enough that he didn't have to worry about pushing himself too hard as he would heal within a day or so. As of now, Jiraiya had forbidden him from using his clones to do anything but chakra control and learning the basics in every subject from the academy. This included reading any of his grandfather's library. The reason was simple: he refused to teach Naruto anything more advanced until he mastered every aspect of the basics. Luckily for Naruto, he found a way to speed up the taijutsu and weapons portion of this process at an equal rate as the reading and writing, Jiraiya having cryptically suggested improving his writing would be a good idea. He discovered his clones not only transferred memory learned through reading, it also transferred muscle memory, so he could ingrain the actions into his reflexes and instincts, helping him to increase the pace. However, he estimated that it would still take him at least 3/4 of the first year to get all this done, as Jiraiya told him he wouldn't consider him at an adequate level of chakra control until he could make a Rasengan one-handed in an instant, in both hands, at the same time. Needless to say, he was nowhere close to that, which is why he estimated 9 months. But he was determined to make sure his grandfather's sacrifice wasn't for nothing. He put his faith in Naruto, and he wasn't going to let him down. As the boy looked ahead of him to see his teacher, he couldn't help but smile. He was finally getting a real chance to prove how great he could be, and he planned to do that by doing exactly as Tsunade said, become as strong or stronger than Jiraiya in the 4 years he had to train. Naruto understood what that meant. He had learned from his studies that Jiraiya was considered the strongest of the 3 Sannin. It was when he learned that information Naruto realized he never saw Jiraiya take a fight truly serious. Still, he knew he could do it. Unknown location. In a dark cavernous room, 9 glowing figures could be seen gathered. Each was simply a rainbow-colored projection, with only their eyes being regular. "It's been a while since we all gathered like this," an amused and surprisingly shark-like voice commented, the eyes it belonged to being small and shark-like, similar to the voice. It sounded like he was speaking over a radio, a trait that the rest seemed to share. "Indeed it has," commented the figure next to him, one with glowing red eyes with 3 tomo marks spinning around the pupil. His voice was monotone. "So why as we get called here? I want to hurry this up so I can get some more sacrifices for Jashin-sama." An impatient male voice belonging to a pair of lavender eyes complained. The eyes next to him, with red sclera and green irises with no pupils, grunted in annoyance. "Shut up, Haiden, the more time you spend complaining is the more time I lose from collecting money. Your pathetic god can wait," he growled. Finally, a voice belonging to a pair of metallic purple-gray ringed eyes with no sclera spoke out. "Silence. We're here because Zetsu told me he had important news, so Zetsu, tell me what it is," the man commanded. "Oh, no small talk? Oh well, here goes. 2 weeks ago the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was killed at the Valley of the End. They just held the funeral today. We checked, it's him, and he's dead as a doornail." The purple-ringed eyes seemed to narrow before he spoke. "Who is responsible for this delay in our plans?" he asked. Zetsu seemed to grow amused. "Oh, it was Itachi's little brother. He was running off to join Snakeface, and the Kyuubi was sent after him," he replied. All eyes turned to the pair of red ones, which showed no emotions, however their owner certainly was feeling them. Keep being fear and annoyance. "What have you done now, Sasuke? Hokage-sama will hardly overlook this, and you have now just angered a group of very dangerous individuals," Itachi thought. The purple-ringed eyes eventually left Itachi's as the leader spoke. "Considering the circumstances, we'll have to adjust our plans by 1.5 years. So for the next 4 years you shall all take jobs to help finance us when we begin to make our move. That is all," the leader ordered before vanishing. One by one the others followed him in vanishing. Chapter end. Chapter 3, Heroes Come Back. Mt. Mayaboku. Naruto appeared in front of the cottage of Fukusaku, and shimmed out of the plume of smoke. Standing before him was his sensei, the white-haired Sannin Jiraiya. Naruto had changed over the past 4 years. No longer was he a scrawny midget wearing an hideous orange jumpsuit. Now the 16-year-old Naruto stood at a relatively tall 5 feet 10 inches with no baby fat to be seen around his now narrower facial feature. His onyx black eyes had become more narrow, like his father and grandfather. His skin was pale and his spiky blonde hair had grown out long, now reaching the top of his shoulder blades with his bangs framing his face and partially obscuring his right eye like his grandfather. His body was muscular, not quite as lean as a runner but not anywhere near a bodybuilder's body. Overall his physical features had grown to the point that women of all ages would drool over him. His style had changed just as much as his looks. He now wore a vaguely samurai-like attire. On his upper body he wore a sleeveless black coat sewed with a sleeveless white shitage underneath. Underneath those he wore a short-sleeved mesh armor shirt. For pants he now wore black hakama pants tied with a white sash and with white tabi and waraji on his feet. Over all this he wore a long white haori with a deep royal purple inside that fell to just above his ankles with a pattern of black dots and thin ovals. On the back of the haori he had a symbol of a black rhombus with a white inside and 4 black points. Inside the rhombus was the Uchiha clan crest. Around his neck hung the necklace from Tsunade, along with his now black-clothed Hitaiite. As he saw his student Jiraiya grin perversely. "Well, how'd it go? Did you have a good time?" he asked. Naruto narrowed his eyes. "Yes, as a matter of fact, Mei-san is a very pleasant and lovely person. I take it political experience wasn't the only kind you wanted me to get?" Naruto asked rhetorically. All he received was a grin and an perverted giggle. After a few minutes Jiraiya turned serious as he looked at his student. "So, did she go for it? Will Kiri be making an alliance with Konoha?" Jiraiya asked. Naruto kept his face expressionless for a whole minute, making Jiraiya worry. Then he broke out in a proud grin. "Yep, Mei-chan said that she'll be coming to Konoha in a little over a month to discuss it with Tsunade-bachan directly," he told his teacher. At first Jiraiya looked pissed at Naruto making him the great Jiraiya sweat. Then he realized what he called the Mizukage. "Oh, Mei-chan, is it? So you did get close to the Mizukage? How close we talking here?" Jiraiya asked while whipping out a sketchbook. Naruto just shook his head while having a slight blush on his face. "So did you get my order?" Naruto asked, ignoring the comment in favor of his excitement at getting his new sword. Naruto put the book away while nodding as he unsealed the katana in a black sheath from his wrist. "Yep, here you go, kid. Made for channeling lightning and fire chakra, enjoy," Jiraiya explained as he tossed the blade to Naruto. The sword was a standard-looking katana with a purple cloth on the handle that was the same color as the inside of his cloak. The end cap and the tsuka were made of a golden bronze metal with the tsuka being a simple oval. If the blade were unsheathed the sharp edge would be a gleaming silver while the other would be a darker, but still gleaming, gray. Naruto grinned as he held the blade in his hands. He tied it to his sash and looked at his sensei with a firm gaze and a grin. "Alright, looks like it's just about time for my comeback. What do ya say, Ero-senin, you ready to head back to Konoha?" Naruto asked with a mischievous grin. Jiraiya replied with a grin of his own, forgetting the title Naruto gave him for once. "I never thought you'd ask, Gaki," he replied as he opened the door to the cottage and called inside. "Hey Ma, you think you could summon us to the main gate of Konoha?" he asked. "Will do, Jiraiya-chan," Shima replied. While they waited Naruto suddenly chuckled, gaining a curious look from Jiraiya. Seeing the look, Naruto explained. "Oh, I'm just imagining the look on Kakashi's face when I used the Chidori. I still can't believe Bachan managed to get him to give her a scroll on it, and the Raikiri," Naruto explained. A minute later the two disappeared in matching plumes of smoke. Konoha was in for a blast from the past. Konoha, village gates. Naruto and Jiraiya appeared in front of the familiar pair of gates in matching plumes of smoke. Naruto looked nostalgically at the village before him. "It's been a long time since I've set eyes upon the village. They even got around to adding Bachan's face on the monument," Naruto observed. Jiraiya nodded with a grin. As they walked through the gates they were noticed by Izumo and Kotetsu who were guarding them again. "Hey, who are Izumo?" began only to stop as he recognized one as Jiraiya. However, when he looked at the second one his heart stopped, and he felt like he was looking at a ghost. The face was a little different along with the clothes, but it was definitely him. "Hey Kotetsu, is that could it be?" he asked his partner. Kotetsu nodded mutely beside him. Naruto glanced at them and gave them a double-eye smile. "Izumo, Kotetsu, still guarding the gate I see," he said cheerfully. For a second he paused to stretch out his senses, finding that Tsunade was in her office with his former teammates, and her apprentice Shizen. Turning to Jiraiya he spoke again. "See ya later, sensei. I do believe it's time for a Team 7 reunion," he told him pleasantly before he disappeared in a blur of speed, about the level of a mid-jonin. He was headed for Team 7's old training ground as Tsunade had told him to wait there. She had also told him Kakashi would be evaluating him to see if he was worthy of a promotion to either Chunin or Jonin. He'd been told only Niji had made Jonin of the Konoha 10 as they had begun to be called. Jiraiya simply shook his head at Naruto's antics. Turning to the gaping gate guards he smiled sheepishly. Izumo managed to speak. "W was that?" he asked, the question implied. Jiraiya nodded. "Yep, that's Naruto alright," he told them simply before vanishing in a plume of smoke, intending to go watch his student's assessment. It was silent for a few minutes before Kotetsu spoke up. "And I thought he couldn't top painting the Hokage monument in broad daylight and kill me orange. Damn," he said to his partner who nodded. Tsunade's office, just before Naruto and Jiraiya arrive. The two remaining members from the now disbanded Team 7 stood in front of their leader in confusion. They had been told to arrive here to speak with the Hokage, Kakashi being threatened with burning of his Ika if he was late. Needless to say, he was on time. Sakura was the only one who changed. She was taller, and her hair even shorter, with her now wearing a small apron-like pink skirt and a sleeveless red top with her headband worn in the same style. She had also begun to gain slight curves to her figure. I'm sure you are wondering why I called you here. The reason is simple. I want Kakashi to perform the test for a Jonin prospect, and I want you, Sakura, to be there to watch. Tsunade told them, getting straight to the point. At this, both were extremely confused. Usually you had to go through the exams to get a promotion. The only way to do it this way was if the person had the full support of at least 2 elite Jonin or higher. They wondered the person was. Also, having Sakura watch was even more unusual. Shizen behind Tsunade was even more confused. She was usually let in on these types of decisions. Not that I'm complaining, Tsunade-sama, but why have me do the test, and why have Sakura-chan there? Kakashi asked while scratching his head. Tsunade hid a smirk as she clasped her hands together in front of her mouth. Well, I am hereby reinstating Team 7. The man you're testing will be joining as the 3rd member. Tsunade explained in her Hokage voice. At this, the 2 members of the disbanded team tensed. The team was a tense subject for them, and they had no real inclination to replace either team member that they had lost. Shizen saw how tense the 2 appeared to be and decided to speak up, thinking this would throw off the team dynamic. Are you sure that's such a good idea, Tsunade-sama? I mean, to promote someone just like that, and then place him on Team 7? You know how they feel about replacing either missing member? And who is this shinobi? Shizen asked cautiously, trying to find her mentor's reasoning. Tsunade once again hid a grin and spoke in a mock-haughty tone. Of course I am. He's been training during a 4-year mission, and I feel his old rank of genin requires a reassessment. As for who he is, you'll recognize him when you see him. Now let's go, he'll be waiting for us at Team 7's old training ground. I intend for him to take the bell test. Tsunade replied. This piqued Kakashi's interest, as he found it difficult to believe that someone who was genin only 4 years ago could take him one-on-one. Nevertheless, he went with everyone else when Tsunade motioned for them to leave. Training Ground 7. As the 4 Konoha nin arrived at the entrance to the Training Ground 7, looking across the field, they saw a figure out on the opposite side of the river from them, standing on the water. The person was wearing a strange attire for a shinobi, being distinctly samurai-like. He wore a black kimono top with white undergarment and a mesh armor top. For pants he wore black hakama with a white sash. Over that was a white haori, and he wore tabi with waraji sandals. However, it was the hair of the individual that caught their attention the most. It was a long, spiky, sunny blonde in color, with his bangs framing his face, with them partially covering his right eye. Currently his head was tilted down so that the top half of his face was cast into shadow. Well, Kakashi, I'll leave you to your opponent, Shizen. Sakura. Let's go. Tsunade commanded as she took off to the tree line, Shizen and Sakura following reluctantly after. Kakashi meanwhile was getting a strange chill down his spine as he looked at the young man that stood about 50 yards in front of him. Slowly he reached into the pouch on his hip as he removed a single bell and a timer. Placing the timer on the middle stump and tying the bell to his belt, he looked forward as he spoke for the first time. He couldn't shake the feeling he knew this person. You know, it's polite to introduce yourself to your proctor for these kinds of things. How about I start? My name is Hataki Kakashi. There, now your turn. Kakashi told the boy with an eye smile. Naruto grinned as he kept his head tilted downwards. For some reason the grin seemed familiar to Kakashi, but he still couldn't place it. Then the person spoke. Why, I'm hurt, Kakashi. You've forgotten me already. How very rude of you. But I guess I'll reintroduce myself to you. My name is Uchiha, Naruto began, causing all eyes to widen except the pair of Sanins watching. At the same time, Kakashi suddenly placed the grin. It was more sarcastic than he remembered, but a lightly tanned rounder face with whisker marks flashed through his head. Uchiha Naruto! Naruto exclaimed as he whipped his head up for the first time and he looked at Kakashi. Prepare yourself, Kakashi-sensei. He began as he suddenly shot forward at speeds that Rock Lee had during the Chunin exams when his weights were removed. Naruto reappeared in front of Kakashi as he launched a fist at his head. Because this time you won't be able to read your book. Shinobi Battle Tactics No. 1, Taijutsu, the physical art. Naruto exclaimed. Kakashi barely managed to dodge in his shocked state at seeing his favorite student alive. He flipped backwards to put some distance between them as he automatically began to analyze his opponent, forcing down his shock. Over on the sidelines, 2 of the occupants couldn't say the same. With the observers. Sakura watched Kakashi dodge with her eyes widened in shock as she heard what Naruto said. He salive? She asked in shock. Next to her, Shizen was having similar thoughts. Their heads whipped upwards when they heard a chuckle from the tree behind them. There they saw Jiraiya lounging in the fork of the branches. That he is Sakura. I figured it would be a good idea to pretend that he stayed dead so as to give us more time to prepare for Akatsuki. Jiraiya told the two kunoichi. While Sakura simply looked shocked, Shizen now looked worried. Even so, Jiraiya-sama, shouldn't Sakura-chan be helping him against Kakashi? Shouldn't we be worried about him being able to handle Kakashi? Shizen asked worriedly. This only earned her a laugh from the Sannin. Ha ha ha, that's a good one, Shizen. Jiraiya laughed. At seeing her and the now calmer Sakura's look, he turned to face the action where Naruto and Kakashi were now engaged in a fierce exchange of taijutsu. His face took a serious edge as they looked that way as well and finally spoke, with Tsunade idly listening in interest. It's Kakashi that doesn't stand a chance. Jiraiya stated confidently, shocking the two kunoichi at how he said it like it was a foregone conclusion. Seeing their looks, he elaborated as he jumped down so as to speak to them directly, leaning against the tree behind him. You see, the first 9 months we spent on getting Naruto to master the basics of every subject taught in the academy, and getting his chakra controlled to the point that he could make a Rasengan in both hands at the same time in an instant. Jiraiya began. Essentially, this means his chakra control is good enough that if he wanted, he could learn basic medical ninjutsu. Jiraiya explained, shocking the two medical ninjas as that wasn't an easy feat. For the next 9 months he studied all the advanced theories of chakra such as chakra form and change in chakra nature. He even went into the theory of jutsu creation, most importantly seals. The pervert informed them, enjoying the looks of awe the two were giving his student. After that we moved to sparring in taijutsu, and learning his clan's style. It was during this time when he really began to shoot up speed and strength-wise as we focused all our attention on the physical arts including kenjutsu. It was during this 6-month period that he awakened and evolved his Sharingan to 3 tomos. He told the kunoichi, who by now had ceased being shocked by the information. Finally, for the next year after that we discovered his elemental affinities. He has a total of 4. Here Jiraiya paused as he watched them sputter in shock once more. Finally Shizen spoke. F4 elemental affinities? What elements, has he begun to master them? She asked. Jiraiya chuckled. He's only mastered 2, his main one's fire and lightning. He forewent master his 2 secondary affinities, earth and water, in favor of learning and creating jutsu. Overall I would rate him to be an S-rank shinobi, as opposed to Kakashi who is a borderline S-rank. Jiraiya explained. The two kunoichi nodded to this, finally understanding why he was so confident. So that's why you're so confident. I guess that means Naruto is well on his way to realizing his dream, Sakura said with a smile, happy to not only see her teammate alive, but thriving. Jiraiya nodded. Although that's not the biggest reason I say Kakashi has no chance, Jiraiya told them, getting their attention once more. Jiraiya chuckled at their blatant curiosity. The reason I say that is because Naruto is no longer being held back by the Kyuubi, he explained. At this both gasped. What do you mean, Jiraiya-sama? No longer being held back by the Kyuubi? I thought Bijou were considered assets for Jinchuriki. So how could it be holding him back? And why isn't it anymore? Shizen asked. Jiraiya took on a serious expression once more. Well, the easiest to answer is your last question. You see, Kyuubi is no longer sealed in him. Naruto really did die that day, Chidori hole and all, Jiraiya told them. Then how? Sakura gasped as she looked at Naruto fighting their sensei, now trading jutsu. He was dead for a half hour. Luckily he was brought back via a combination of ninjutsu and medical jutsu by his grandfather. I won't tell you who he was, that is Naruto's story to tell. But as for why Kyuubi was holding him back, Jiraiya answered, trailing off to ensure he had their attention. For most people it would be a benefit, like Shizen said. It stretches their coils and expands their reserves. They also can use the Bijou's chakra if they need to, and even gain certain abilities. In Naruto's case it would be his rapid regeneration, that is even better than the other Jinchuriki. However, he paused as he reached the turning point of his explanation. The two waited with bated breath for him to continue, wondering how such things could be bad, Sakura remembering how Naruto had been up the next day after the fight with Haku, while Sasuke, and even Zabuza when he was hit in the neck with the ice user's Sanban, were bedridden for at least 2 weeks. However, his next words changed their minds. In Naruto's case, having Kyuubi sealed at birth was a hindrance, because unlike other Jinchuriki whose intelligence was already seen by others, his had not, allowing Kyuubi to suppress it and thus make his emotions unstable, allowing it more influence. However, that wasn't the biggest hindrance, Jiraiya continued. The biggest hindrance was the fact that unlike most Jinchuriki, he didn't need the boost to his reserves. His reserves were naturally so vast, it was their formidable size that kept the beast from overtaking his mind. Without them being forced to hold back the Kyuubi's own chakra in check by supercharging the seal, he now has the reserves of one of the weaker tail beasts. In short, He has about 1.5 times the chakra as Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara in their prime. By the time he reaches his peak, he'll have the same as the two combined. Jiraiya told them, shocking/awing the hell out of them. Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara were considered to be gods amongst shinobi. If Naruto's reserves were on par with theirs, even at his young age when they weren't fully developed, what would they be when they were? On top of this, he has trained his chakra, like I said, to use basic medical ninjutsu, meaning he can get the very most possible out of his reserves. Jiraiya added, just to drive the point home. By that time they were looking back at the action, watching Naruto toss around ninjutsu like it was candy. With Naruto and Kakashi, after Kakashi dodged. As he looked at his sensei, Naruto couldn't help but grin at how different this was from the last time. This time it was him that was shocking his sensei. That's what you said the last time we did this test. Shinobi Battle Tactics Lesson 1, Taijutsu. Let's test how I've improved at this over these past 4 years, Naruto said as he settled into the Uchiha clan style. Kakashi eyed his opponent wearily. The speed Naruto showed was impressive and his execution of the attack was flawless. But he was convinced it had more to do with the fact he had let himself be distracted. As he saw the stance Naruto fell into, Kakashi raised an eyebrow. The interceptor fist, huh? I heard you call yourself an Uchiha, yet you don't seem to have the Sharingan? How do you plan to fully utilize this style? You might have become stronger and faster as well as smarter. But you still make mistakes you shouldn't. Kakashi chastised as he shot forward. Naruto grinned as he watched Kakashi shot towards him at high speeds. He had assumed Naruto was making a mistake by using a style that required the Sharingan without the Sharingan. In truth, he just wanted Kakashi to assume that he was making mistakes. Just like he wanted him to assume the speed and strength he showed was it. After all, the old Naruto would have done that, come at him as fast and hard as he could. He knew Kakashi would then assume it was his own distraction that let him almost get caught, thus setting him up to assume he was still more skilled, if not more powerful, than Naruto himself. Which is exactly what Naruto wanted right now. As Kakashi approached, Naruto easily followed and read his movements. Just as he went to hit Naruto, he threw up his arm to block it, shoving it off to the side so that Kakashi would come up with a kick, which he caught under his arm, and then shot forward an elbow to Kakashi's jaw as he did. The copy Nin backpedaled hastily as he sought to re-evaluate the situation. You assumed I didn't have the Sharingan, sensei, Naruto told him. With a blur, he shot forward at speeds of an elite jonin as his Sharingan spun to life, predicting Kakashi's block and shooting past it to deliver a punishing kick to his ribs that sent the silver-haired man tumbling. Kakashi quickly rolled back to his feet in a ready stance as he re-evaluated his opponent. He had assumed something and it had cost him. Now he realized Naruto didn't make mistakes, he let Kakashi think he did. So shall we begin in earnest? Naruto asked as he settled back into his stance with his Sharingan still active. Kakashi nodded as he raised his Hitite and exposed his own Sharingan. Let's go! Kakashi exclaimed as both shot towards each other. Naruto came in and blocked a right hook by Kakashi, sending jab at his solar plexus, pulling back to block as Kakashi shot a kick up at him. Unfortunately, Kakashi saw this coming and used it as a springboard to kick him with his last foot, sending Naruto stumbling back as Kakashi flipped backwards as well. Naruto recovered quickly from the blow and shot forward at Kakashi, sending him a relentless barrage of kicks and punches. Kakashi managed to dodge through most of the blows, however he appeared to be caught by one of them in the head. His body sailed through the air, and just as it was about to hit a tree he burst into smoke to reveal a shattered log. Heh never changes, Naruto declared as he reached out his senses. The next thing he knew, he was in a completely different place. It was a battlefield and before him was everyone close to him, slaughtered, and above him the moon glared down an evil red with concentric rings and 9 tomo in it. His grandfather stood before him telling him how disappointed he was. Naruto gave a snort of derision. Really, Kakashi? Megan, Narakumi no Jutsu 1? That's the best you can do? Let me show you the true power of a genjutsu when one possesses the Sharingan. Naruto spoke scathingly as his eyes spun fiercely. Megan, Kyo Tenshi Ten 2! Naruto exclaimed as suddenly Kakashi found himself in a vision of himself standing over the dead bodies of everyone he had ever failed. Before he could do anything, Naruto appeared before him. You possess the eye, but you can't use it like an Uchiha, can you? You underestimated me again, thinking I knew nothing of genjutsu. You are incorrect. I spent my spare time practicing both using and dispelling it. Now, taste another Sharingan genjutsu. Naruto spoke to Kakashi. His Sharingan spun once more as he activated the jutsu. Megan, Kasegui no Jutsu 3! Naruto called. Kakashi suddenly saw the world turn blood red as he was impaled by 3 large rusty stakes that held him in place. He could only scream in agony as the intense pain of his body being pierced racked him. A few seconds later the world faded and showed them back in the training ground with Kakashi sitting on a branch looking directly into Naruto's eyes with a look of shock. Shinobi Battle Tactics Lesson Number 2, Genjutsu, the Illusionary Art. Sakura may have fallen for it during the Genin test, and 4 years ago you would have caught me in it as well. However now, my chakra is far too controlled to succumb to that. Naruto told the copy Nin, who nodded mutely. So that just leaves ninjutsu. What do you say, Kakashi? Shall we begin round 3? Naruto asked in amusement. Kakashi only nodded in reply. As soon as he had Naruto sped through one-handed seals in his left hand, ending on tiger, while making a tiger seal with his right. Doton, Doria Taiga, 4 Katan, Ryuka no Jutsu, 5. He shouted as a river of mud began to rush towards Kakashi and he breathed out a stream of flames that traveled along the mud, turning it molten. The combination jutsu rushed towards the wide-eyed Kakashi as he hastily performed a substitution, just in time too as a second later the jutsu hit and exploded in a wave of fire and molten mud. Naruto turned to his left a second later, just in time to see Kakashi channel lightning chakra to both hands as he called out his technique. Reiju Hashiri no Jutsu, 6. Kakashi called. 2 wolves made of lightning formed, 1 for each hand. Still connected to Kakashi, they sped towards Naruto, intent on tearing him with their fangs and claws. They might have too if he didn't fly through more hand seals. Once again he used 2 different sets of one-handed. Suetun, Baku Sui Shoha, 7. Raitun, Kangeki Ha 8. He shouted as he launched a giant wave of electrified water at Kakashi, who gulped. A few seconds later Kakashi was swallowed up by the wave of wild electrified water. But Naruto knew better. Kakashi wouldn't be caught by that. Sure enough, right where the wave hit was an ornate earth wall with dog heads on it, no doubt having blocked the jutsu. The only question was, where was Kakashi? Remembering their genin test, he came to a conclusion. A split second before a pair of hands erupted from the earth, Naruto jumped away, beginning another chain of hand seals as he did. Katan Karyudan, 10. Naruto shouted as he spewed a large Chinese dragon that flew towards where the hands were in the ground, exploding on impact. When the smoke cleared it revealed a crater with a slightly charred Kakashi staring up at Naruto wide-eyed once more. What the hell? He's completely dominated this fight. I've barely been keeping from being injured. He's taking advantage of the fact he can throw around this level of jutsu like pieces of candy, forcing me to exert myself to keep out of the way. Kakashi analyzed, realizing he had no choice but to go at Naruto just as hard, despite the fact he would tire easier. Kakashi quickly began to speed through hand seals, with Naruto keeping up with the movements to see which jutsu he would use. Suetun, Suryuden no Jutsu, 11. Kakashi called as a giant dragon made of water arose from the river and began to tear towards Naruto. Kakashi wasn't done as he flashed through even more hand seals. Soon the dragon became electrified with the same lightning jutsu Naruto used earlier. Soon the dragon crashed onto the site Naruto stood at, seemingly crushing him and electrifying him at the same time. Raitun, Raryu no Tatsumaki, 12. They yelled as they created 2 dragon-shaped tornadoes of lightning, with arms and all. The 2 dragons launched themselves on the position Naruto was last in, impacting the ground and creating a huge cloud of dust. For some reason I doubt that did it. I saw him use a technique a split second before the first combination hit. So it's likely he avoided both. Better be ready, he concluded as he flashed through hand seals. Soon the air was filled with the sound of chirping birds as Kakashi braced his hand and held it as his palm filled with lightning. Raikiri! Kakashi shouted as lightning sparked around him in a circle. He was about to charge where he saw Naruto's figure in the cloud of dust when he heard a voice speaking from inside it. You could use that technique, Kakashi-sensei, but it won't make a difference, Naruto told him, causing Kakashi to become suspicious. A second later Kakashi's eyes widened as he felt cold steel against his neck and heard the chirping of a chidori behind him. Looking down he saw the blade of a katana held there, slightly cutting through the cloth of the mask. He also saw the sparking of lightning that could only come from a chidori. Because that's a clone, I believe that is matched Proctor-san, Naruto stated cheerfully as he removed the sword. As Kakashi turned around he was greeted by the sight of Naruto with a chidori still active in his right hand. How? Kakashi asked stupefied, unable to figure out how Naruto learned the chidori. You remember when Bachan asked for a scroll on it, and the Raikiri to be placed in the forbidden scroll? She just happened to give them to me to copy first. You see, the chidori is a very versatile threshold technique for creating other jutsu, Naruto explained. Kakashi simply nodded with an eye smile as he slumped tiredly. I guess so. You really have surpassed me, Naruto, Kakashi stated. Before the blonde could reply they heard a clapping coming from the side of the clearing. There Tsunade and the others were stepping out of the bushes, with Sakura and Shizen having awestruck looks on their faces, and the Sannin with big grins on their faces. Very impressive, Naruto. You've definitely shown the power and skills to be a jonin, wouldn't you agree, Kakashi? She asked, smiling playfully at the worn-out elite jonin. Kakashi nodded with a sheepish look on his face. I would say most definitely. If he had more experience, I'd suggest elite jonin, but I think jonin is good enough for now, Kakashi replied. Naruto felt a bit of pride at hearing his first sensei praise him like that. After he had started learning the basics in his first 9 months, he finally appreciated what Kakashi did in the Chunin exams. He got Naruto someone who would teach him the basics, which he needed to learn anything Kakashi could teach him. So even though he knew he was currently stronger than Kakashi, it was good to hear the copy nin praise his skills. Tsunade meanwhile nodded in satisfaction of the copy nin's reply. After his own experience after being promoted, he didn't give his stamp of approval to gain the promotion easily. This was only the 3rd time he did it, the first being Ginma, the second Anko. Turning to Naruto, she spoke again. Good then, as of this moment, Uchiha Naruto, you are a jonin of Konoha. The paperwork has already been taken care of. I suspect there will be a meeting with the council tomorrow. As the clan heir of the Uchiha, you'll need to attend both to announce your return, and to decide whether you yourself want to attend the meetings, or let a proxy stand in for you, meaning they carry the vote of your clan. Tsunade informed the newly minted jonin. Naruto simply nodded with a smile. Naruto then turned to his 2 teammates. Sorry, but I'll have to catch up with you guys tomorrow. Right now, I would really like to just go see the village and spread the word I'm back. Catch you later, Naruto told them with a wave as he vanished in a shunshin. Jiraiya grunted as he saw this. So he still hasn't mastered it, huh? He spoke as if to himself, although everyone noticed. Hasn't mastered what, Jiraiya? Tsunade asked curiously. Jiraiya hummed for a second before replying. Oh, nothing, it's just that he has been trying for quite some time to improve on the shunshin to make an all-new jutsu, one that will allow him to move at the speeds of a shunshin constantly. I just figure he hasn't mastered it if he is still using shunshin, Jiraiya replied. Kakashi stared after his student. Yes, he really is a once-in-a-generation shinobi, Kakashi thought to himself. Streets of Konoha, near Ichiraku's ramen. Naruto reappeared from his shunshin as he gazed around himself. He was getting many looks of lust from the women on the street. He also got many looks from the men, of jealousy. As he looked forward, he was surprised to see 2 of the people he wanted to see, walking right beside each other. Which he found rather ironic because just 4 years ago they were opponents in the Chunin exams. Now it looked like they might be on a date. One was a lazy-looking man with his hair pulled back into a ponytail and a standard Chunin attire with the Hittite on his bicep. As for the person next to him, she was a blonde-haired woman with her hair pulled back into 4 ponytails and a Hittite on her forehead. She wore a black kimono with a large metal object on her back. The 2 weren't looking his way, looking more towards each other. Holding down a grin, he spoke just as they reached to where they were 10 feet from him. My Tamari-san, on a date with the lazy ass? What would Gara-san say? He called in a teasing voice. The 2 whipped their heads his way as they both had light blushes on their faces. Looking to see who had spoken, they were confused to see an unfamiliar blonde man. They were on guard despite the leaf headband. He was their age and he stood out. They should have seen him around before. Although he did look oddly familiar. I'm sorry, but I don't think we've met before. Perhaps you should introduce yourself. Shikamaru spoke cautiously as he began to move his hands to make the rat seal required for his clan jutsu. Temari meanwhile began to reach for her fan. Before either could do as they intended, they felt a hand grip theirs, stopping their movements midway. Naruto had disappeared from his spot and now stood between the 2, shoulder to shoulder, facing away from them as one arm reached back to hold Shikamaru's hand while the other stopped Temari's. Naruto's head was downcast, creating a shadow of his upper face. Shikamaru, Temari, I am so very disappointed. You don't remember me, he said in a serious tone, faking being hurt. Meanwhile, the 2 shinobi were thinking about how fast he had intercepted them. I'm a jonin, yet he moved so fast I couldn't even see it. Who is this guy? Temari wondered with her eyes wide in fear. She knew he outclassed her. Just from that single instance he revealed he could kill her without breaking a sweat. Shikamaru meanwhile was feeling slight fear, but was also more analytical. He's mocking us, expected our reaction. What's more, he's not concerned at all. So he's either very arrogant or he knows we're not a threat to him, he thought. Naruto spoke up once more. Although I guess I do look different from that fake corpse you saw at my funeral. Thanks for attending, by the way. I was told it was quite nice. I was busy training at the time, Naruto informed them with a smile. Shikamaru and Temari gasped in unison as they both realized why he looked slightly familiar. Also, everything he said finally fell into place. They spoke his name at the same time. Naruto! They exclaimed. The blonde grinned as he let go of their hands, stepping back as he did. The one and only! Uchiha Naruto, at your service! He exclaimed with a cheerful smile on his face. The two looked as if thunderstruck as he stood before them once more. The fact he was alive brought both feelings of happiness that he wasn't dead, but also anger at realizing he pretended to be dead. Troublesome blonde, faking your death like that. Do you know how sad that made the rest of us on the retrieval team? Shikamaru asked with a sigh, his voice holding no real venom within it. Temari nodded to this. Gaara had been very sad at the death of his first friend. Naruto sobered up slightly at this. Yeah, I know. I wouldn't have done it if there was another way, but this gave us all a leg up on Akatsuki. Erosenin and I trained ridiculously hard. I can say with confidence that I could take on someone of Itachi and win without sustaining a major injury, and I just beat Kakashi-sensei to pass an impromptu Jonin test. Not only that, we began to build inroads with other villages. Why, next month the Mizukage herself is coming to speak to Bachan. He explained to the two. Upon hearing this, the two tacticians calmed down. He was right, of course. Before they would have had 3 years, he gave them 1 extra. On top of that, it sounded like they had begun to build support against Akatsuki. Shikamaru sighed, then he smiled. Well, in that case it's good to have you back. We would stick around, but we got things to do, planning the next Chunin exams. But congratulations on making Jonin. We'll be sure to spread the word of you being alive and the promotion, Shikamaru said. With this, he and Temari nodded politely and then walked past the blonde. Naruto smiled before turning and continuing on his way to Ichiraku's ramen. While he may not revere ramen as he used to, he still loved Ichiraku's, and it would be good to see Ayam and Tuchi. He continued to walk for the next few minutes. Finally, he arrived at the ramen shop. Looking at the white curtain for a moment, he took a deep breath before pushing them aside and walking into the ramen shop. He got 2 steps and registered another 2 familiar people currently engaged in a kiss, making it very clear they were on a date. Before he could register more, he was tackled by a large white blur that gave a huge bark of joy. The next thing he knew, he was pinned to the ground with gigantic paws on his chest as a huge bear-sized white dog licked his face all over. It took him less than a second to realize who the dog was as he heard a shout of "What the hell, Akamaru?" from one of the two in the stand. Good to see you too, Akamaru. No, get off, Naruto said as he gently shoved the giant hound off. As he got off, and the big dog woofed in excitement as he panted with his tongue hanging out. Naruto simply gave him a few pats on the head before he walked through the curtain again with the white dog following after. As he cleared it, he was greeted with the sight of the 2 people he thought he saw originally. The first was a boy his age with spiky brown hair who was shorter than himself by about 4 inches. His eyes were slit, and he had red fang marks on his cheeks. He wore a black leather form-fitting black jacket, with zips over the chest and sleeves. He also wore black pants and sandals, also with zips, matching the jacket. Under the jacket he wore a gray mesh armor shirt. Next to him stood a beautiful young woman with long dark blue hair and pale lavender pupil-less eyes. She wore a lavender hooded jacket with blue shinobi pants that stopped at her calves with blue sandals. Currently they were looking at the blonde shinobi, puzzled at him seeming to have known Akamaru. More puzzling was Akamaru's reaction. He acted like the blonde was an old friend. As he rubbed Akamaru's head, Naruto spoke. So the dog recognizes me but not you? Geez, Kibblebreath, I would have thought your senses would get sharper, not duller. Speaking of the dog, what the hell kind of steroids did you feed him? Naruto teased the Inuzuka. At the nickname, Kiba's eyes widened as he took a sniff and caught the scent of the blonde, paling as if he was seeing a ghost. The lavender-eyed girl looked confused for a second as she studied the man's face before her eyes widened as well. So I see you recognized me. You got it faster than Shikamaru and Temari did. I just ran into them, Naruto said as he moved past the two to sit at the counter, where Ayam was looking at the interaction confused look. Naruto smiled at her as he sat, unsealing a bottle of sake and a cup from his wrist, preferring it to the traditional saucer. He poured some of the beverage into the cup before speaking once more. Hey there, it's good to see you again, Ayam-chan, he told her as he took a sip of the sake. The waitress was confused before Kiba spoke up, turning to look at Naruto's back just as Hinata did. And now Naruto? But you're dead. We were at your funeral, I saw your body myself. What the hell's going on? Kiba asked in a shaky voice, his usual brashness only shining through to make his confusion known. Naruto turned slightly so he could look at the 2 other Konoha shinobi out of the corner of his eye as he took a sip of sake. The rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. I was only dead for a half hour. I said before and I'll say it again, I will not die until I become Hokage. Apparently some god heard my declaration, because there was someone nearby at the time with the ninjutsu and medical ninjutsu knowledge to bring me back. So I made the most of it, and faked my death to give me another year and a half to train for the coming storm, Naruto explained, turning back to face the frozen Ayam. It was then when Hinata and Kiba sat down to his right, and Hinata spoke. And then Naruto-kun? Why you are really alive? She asked softly. Naruto nodded before speaking. Yes, I am, and I will make one thing clear before you say anything else. I realized that you used to have a crush on me while I was away. I have only one thing to say. Naruto began, making Kiba nervous as he brought that up. Kiba and Hinata only got together in the past few months. If Naruto were to waltz in now and say he wanted to give a relationship with her a shot, Hinata's old feelings might be drug up and she might fall into her old habits. Already the stuttering was back. As horrible as it was to say, Naruto's death was the best thing to ever happen to her confidence and boldness. She was still shy, but she was assertive when she needed to be, and stuttered only rarely. However, his concerns were laid to rest by Naruto's next words. They were ones he had heard from Hinata when he first asked her out. I'm glad you and Kiba got together. What you had for me wasn't really love, more like an admiration because I was an ideal for you to live up to. So I'm glad you moved on to be with someone you can truly care about. Also, it's a good thing too, as the me you admired was only a sickly imitation of the real me that I am now. Naruto said to the two Chunin, surprising and confusing them and the waitress staring at the blonde. You see, I know as Chunin you've been briefed on the beast I used to hold, which left when I died that day. It's no longer handicapping my intelligence, and thus the real me flourishes. So let me reintroduce myself. Naruto said, finishing his cup of sake. Uchiha Naruto, it's nice to meet you, he exclaimed as he smiled at the three. Deserts near Suna. Two cloaked figures approached Suna. They both wore straw hats on their heads. They both wore cloaks with red clouds on them. One walked normally and had long blonde hair with an bang covering his left eye. His fingernails were painted. His partner was a hunchback figure who seemed to slide across the ground similar to a slug or some such animal. The bells of their hat jingled for every step or lunge made across the sandy terrain. In front of them rose a massive wall that was tiered so as to let the defenders. We're almost there, Sasori, my man. I wonder, are you excited to see your old village once more, HNN? The blonde one wondered to the other one. Sasori grunted before he replied in a deep, growly voice. I feel nothing for that place. Just be sure that you don't keep me waiting. My spy has already begun clearing the way for us. You just have to go in and take the Jinchuriki. Sasori replied as they reached the gates of Suna. In front of them stood a single man with half his face being obscured by a cloth. He had black hair and a goatee. Sasori-sama, welcome back. The man greeted the hunchback. Sasori grunted once more before replying. Yura, so you remember me. How do you feel? Sasori asked. Yura placed a hand to his head as if it ached. A little weird still, disoriented from when the technique activated and I knew who I was again. The man replied. Sasori seemed to be satisfied with this answer. Good Daidara, get to work, you know how I hate to be kept waiting. Sasori growled to the other man. The man for his part said nothing as he opened his palm, revealing a mouth that spat out a small clay bird. Yeah, I'm going. This village is very artistic though. I'll enjoy making it one of my masterpieces. He spoke as he threw the sculpture and made a hand sign. The bird erupted into smoke as it sailed through the air. Deidara jumped on the now enormous bird as it took off into the sky, sailing over the great village. End chapter. What if Madara Uchiha gives Naruto Sharingan? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.